develop their. A bird needs two wings, you see. Wisdom and compassion. Wisdom first, compassion next. Okay, good morning, everyone. Shaharut, hello, happy to see you. But you had a different name yesterday, Shaharut. Who are you now? Who are you today? You had Rami, yes. Oh, there you are, Rami. There he is. Okay, good on you. Okay. Travis, Mary, Connor. Hello, Young. Good to see you all. Okay, people. So the topic for the weekend is transforming problems, and we did a whole lot of stuff yesterday. So I have a feeling today we should go a bit more depth back into the wisdom wing, talk a bit more depth about karma, reminding ourselves of it, and about the karma in the mind, which is all the basis of being able to transform problems anyway, you know. So I think we'll do that, keep going in more depth in those topics. So we sing our little prayer. We did our motivation before, so I'll sing it in Tibetan, our prayer in Tibetan. The second two lines are kind of express what we just said. And the first two lines are expressing for those of us who are Buddhist, it's reminding ourselves our reliance on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chadang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog. So the first one was the English one and the second two Tibetan. That's three. Okay. So in general, as a Buddhist, if you really get it right down to the nuts and bolts, what we're trying to do is know our mind. And why would we want to know our mind? Because Buddha has found, you've got to remember this, from his own experience. It's not just speculation. He's not making it up. It's not coming from revelation. It's coming from his own hard work internally. He has found that what happiness and suffering are the main causes of them are the mind, not the outside world. That's the essence of what he's saying. You could argue that. And that, of course, the point of it all is that he has found through his own experience that the true nature of the mind, which means what its potential is to be one, free of all the nonsense, two, full of all the goodness, speaking really simply. And that idea is expressed beautifully by the Tibetan word sangye, which is the equivalent of the word Buddha, Sanskrit. So the first syllable, sang, the etymology of it, it implies, these are exact words, it implies the eradication from our own mind, our own consciousness, the eradication of all neuroses, all ego grasping, all attachment, all anger, all jealousy, all the nonsense. Therefore, all the suffering, because that's the cause of it. And second, gye implies the development to perfection, literally, of all the goodness, all the wisdom. That's what Buddha has found. That's an outrageous concept if you think about it. That is not the view of neuroscience. That is not the view of modern psychology. No way. You go to a neuroscientist and you say, would you please give me methods to get rid of all neuroses, all fears, all anger, all depression, all jealousy forever, and develop to perfection all wisdom and goodness and compassion and joy? He will, she will, they will laugh at you. So we've got to hear these words clearly. That's what Buddha is saying. So, of course, we call that religion. Oh, yeah, I believe in Buddhism. I believe in reincarnation. And we think religion is made up. We give it no credibility, because you don't think you can prove it. You don't think it's doable. You think you just cross your fingers and hope for the best. That's the thing we have to remember. Buddha is not a creator. He, in fact, says there's no such thing as a creator. It's a misconception. He's not being rude. He's found this from his own direct observation. He says that every mind, every consciousness, which is not physical, which is not the handiwork of mummy or daddy or God, which is not the brain, which is not a function of the physical at all, which didn't come out of nowhere, which is therefore a beginningless and endless continuity of mental moments, that every mind, every being's mind just naturally, in its nature, possesses this potential to be a Buddha, rid of the rubbish and full of the goodness. That's the essence. So if you hear that the end result, Sangye, is rid of the rubbish and full of the goodness, if that's the result, then it tells you immediately the methodology. You got to learn to distinguish in your mind the stuff that's the rubbish from the stuff that's the good, so you can rid the rubbish and do the good. It's that simple. The principle, the concept, the theory, the job. Wow, takes time. But getting down the job you're trying to do is kind of consoling. You know where you're heading. This is a powerful idea. And all the Buddhist literature, it's kind of, you can prove it logically. That's why they say we all possess Buddha nature. This esoteric concept, but that's all it means. So what it means is all minds necessarily possess the potential to become a Buddha. That's all it means. So we don't talk that way. So if you think I always think of an acorn. We could say all acorns possess oak tree nature. It's exactly true. We don't say it that way, but it's perfect. So in other words, by definition, if that is an acorn, by definition, it is a potential oak tree. It could be food. A squirrel thinks it's food. You could use it as a weapon. You could use it as jewelry. No argument. But what is it in its bones? It's a potential oak tree. That's the meaning of Buddha nature. That's very powerful, very encouraging. So we've got to have some confidence in that. Then you're prepared to do the hard work, knowing where you're heading, not just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. And you have to do it. It can't come from somewhere else. And Buddha has found that that is the potential of all minds. So one way of saying what a Buddha is, what the qualities of a Buddha, it's very interesting, this. There are 3 essential qualities. No, let me tell you a story first. Okay, one time in Melbourne, where I'm from, I was asked to give a talk at the Catholic University. A friend of mine I went to school with, she knew I was a Buddhist nun now. So they invited me. I had this 20-minute slot in this conference. And I didn't know what to talk about. Even the morning I got there, I didn't know what to talk about. So then I thought I'd look up the dictionary and find out what is the definition of God. Okay. So I used to be a Catholic, obviously. So it was very interesting. I thought it said 3 essential qualities: infinite wisdom, which of course is we use Greek words, omniscience, infinite compassion, and infinite power. They call it omnipotence, infinite power. Because you've got to be clear what that means. 3 essential qualities. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? They are exactly what the Buddha would say from the Mahayana perspective, the 3 qualities of a Buddha, and everybody possesses that potential. So my talk was the similarities between the definition of God and Buddha. I don't know if they liked it, but that's what I talked about. And of course, the point that's shocking to Christians and Muslims is to say that you can have omniscience, omnipotence, and infinite compassion. That's very, very shocking. That's hard to cope with. But that's what Buddha's saying. So in a sense, he agrees with that level of capacity, but everybody has it. Therefore, you don't need creating by anybody else. So you don't need it. You can do it yourself. That's the radical point that Buddha's making. So he came out of the Hindus who still have that view of inherent God. And he went further. No, don't need the external source. You do need the external source to learn from. All the beings who have become a Buddha already teach you. But you can become your own Buddha. That's kind of profound, That's a shocking concept. That's what Buddha's saying. So if that's the end result, as I said, that implies the methodology. It implies it. I better learn to distinguish. In this mind of mine, as we talked yesterday, I need to learn to distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues. And that's the way the Buddhist psychological model breaks up, divides the contents of our mind. You could say we have thousands and thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions, and they're all like a chaotic big soup, aren't they? And in our modern culture, modern psychology and modern neuroscience, we don't have methods to sort it out. That's what Buddha has done. And there's nothing remotely like it. I'm not being sectarian or rude here. The Western view has got nowhere near the sophistication that these Indians invented 3,000 years ago, this through learning this skill called single-pointed concentration. They discovered the mind. They didn't invent the mind. It's always been there. They discovered it and they articulated it. And Buddha went with this system, and then he went further when he, as His Holiness says, it was these Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation of the nature of self. So let's go straight to that. Buddha nature is all about emptiness. Self is all about emptiness. Let's go straight to emptiness now. This is where Buddha diverged in his own direction. These genius Hindus already had found the methods which are described in the first and second scopes. They came up with that already. They found methods to stop the gross level of suffering. They found methods to stop even attachment. They already did that. But they got as far as they could go, and they got to, with a concentration technique, got to a very subtle level that they call this subtle level of concentration, all the different stages. And Buddha, and that's as far as they got. They called that liberation. But the Buddha essentially said, no, there's still the mistake of grasping at inherent me, grasping at inherent things, grasping it at the inherent concept of God out there. That was still dualism. But he went further and removed even the subtlest imprints from the mind and the delusions. That's where he diverged in his own direction. And now we have Buddhism. And even in Buddhism, there are these different presentations of emptiness, of self, So let's look at that. Because everything we talked about yesterday leads to this. In this Lam Rim, it's all laid out in perfectly structured, beautifully, leading us all to emptiness, in the six perfections. So elegant, so beautiful. So what does self mean? Well, the word that's used in the equivalent in Christianity is the word soul, or people might say spirit. In other words, some essential extra thing in there. There's body and there's mind, and then there's soul. Body, mind, and self. This intrinsic, essential energy that's there, that defines who we are, and in Christian terms is given to us by God. The Hindus, they also talk about reincarnation, but still there is that energy of God, and you become this essential self becomes oneness with God, Atman, But that Buddha does not assert that. There's no separate peace. So the word self, from the Buddhist perspective, is, in the simple sense, conventionally, is equivalent to the word person, or me, or I. They are all equivalent. So it's the word used to refer to a type of phenomenon. So the word microphone refers to that. The word couch refers to this. The word lid refers to that. We know these things. So the word person refers to this phenomenon, that phenomenon, this phenomenon. So now, Buddha is also a person, but for whatever reason, this other term that's used, we know very well, the term sentient being. I think that the actual translation of the Tibetan is really delicious. The Tibetan word semchen, mind possessor, mind haver. We are havers of mind. We are possessors of mind. I think that's a much better translation, a mind possessor. It's very delicious, isn't it? But curiously, Buddha is not called a mind possessor, but he is called a person. I don't know why. But broadly, we can use the word synonymously here. We could do that, Person, mind possessor, I, me, self. So an ant is one of those. A dog is one of those. We all know very well from Buddha's perspective, he has observed with his own mind there are trillions of persons, trillions of mind possessors, all with different types of physical energy and types of mental states. Some very suffering, called hell beings or spirits or animals, and some with very relatively happy minds called human, and even with more blissful minds called the God realm, or even these ones in the more subtle levels of concentration that the Hindus talk about. All of them are mind possessors, and from the Buddhist perspective, as long as we are a mind possessor, even bodhisattvas are mind possessors, sentient beings, but it's only when you become a Buddha that you become fully, that you're not called a sentient being. There's something limited about being a sentient being, even if the highest level ones. And of course, all the ones that Hindus describe, because they haven't realized emptiness, they're still in samsara. By definition, being in samsara means you still have ego grasping. You still have the root delusion. Bare minimum is that. So person or self. So what we're discussing here, where Buddha diverged in his own direction, is all about what is the self? How does it exist? So, and broadly speaking, how does everything exist? Because he says this is the final mistake. So this is why when we look at the contents of our mental consciousness, Buddha divides, remember, all of thought. We've got sensory consciousness, which is merely the part of our mind that functions through the medium of the eyeballs to have cognition of eye consciousness, cognition of sound, smell, taste. They're very limited in their capacity for cognition. They're like dumb animals. They're not intelligent. They're bright and sharp, but there's no conceptuality about them. They're not thought, they're not discursive. They're just bare cognition of shape and color and sound and smell and taste. And they're powerful. But our trouble is, as Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss. We give them more power than they really got. And because they're our doorway into the world, and because that's the only way we know to get happy feelings through our senses, is get the objects of the senses. So we're dominated by our sensory experiences, and we're thrown by them terribly. But then we've got mental consciousness. Mental consciousness. Now, there's got two levels. There's the grosser level, and that's called concepts, thoughts, conceptuality. And we live at that level. And in fact, we live at the grossest level of conceptuality. And now that includes, surprisingly to us, not only all the concepts and the intellectual thoughts, which is what we think of as concepts, but also all our emotions. And when we understand that all our emotions, like anger and love and compassion, whether they are rooted in being concepts, that is a real insight into the way the mind works as far as Buddhism is concerned. And we need to understand this. So we'll discuss all this today too. Now we have much subtler levels of conceptuality. So don't underestimate conceptuality. You only access these more subtle levels of conceptuality when you get single point of concentration. At the moment, our conceptuality is out of control. We're all ADHD, and I'm not joking. We think we're so clever in coming up with ADHD. Buddha's been telling us for 2,500 years, and the Hindus before him. We're all completely got uncontrolled thoughts. That's called uncontrolled thoughts. Duh. Sure, there's more severe than others. It's always been that way. Come on. So that's why these Indians invented this incredibly sophisticated technique called single-pointed concentration. Unbelievable. There's nothing remotely like it. Please forgive me, in Christianity or the other religions, there's no evidence of it anywhere. People through like these saints, you read some of these saints, like Saint Teresa of Avila. She would go into these states of bliss and concentration, but she didn't have the technique. It was just probably she'd been a Hindu in the past, and she got it down, or maybe a Buddhist. There's no technique. You just go there. It's like blessing from God or something. These Indians invented the technique, and it's still alive today. People like you and me doing it. Hard work, It's right there, enabling you to completely subdue the grosser level of your conceptuality and therefore all the gross afflictions, and to not forever remove them, but temporarily cease them, and even the sensory consciousness. So when you really got serious concentration in this technique, which is divided into 9 stages of subtlety, Lama Yeshe talks about this. I mentioned yesterday some of the qualities that you taste in your mind that are inconceivable and unknown unless you've done the work. Utter bliss, utter joy, as if you could count every atom in the universe. Still, you can be conceptual. When you really got to the subtlest level, you get to the non-conceptual level, and that's when you can start to get realizations of things. And that's when, finally, when you have a non-conceptual direct insight into emptiness, the first moment of that is when you cut the root of samsara. You've got more work to do, but you can't go back after that. And that's the goal first. And you've got to have single point of concentration to do that. You cannot do that at a gross conceptual level, but we can do plenty at a gross conceptual level. We're doing it right now today. We're talking at a gross conceptual level here. Got to get that level clear first. Get the theories clear first. Then you can get the experience. So let's go back to a person. So a person, okay, in general, in terms of how things exist, finally, that is to say they have no inherent nature, we have to understand that about everything. Not only the person, they divide, as we know in all the teachings we study, they talk about the emptiness of the person and the emptiness of the phenomena, because the different types of teachings in Buddhism, some of them say persons are empty, but phenomena aren't. But here, the view we're discussing here, which is the one coming from our lamas, which is the Prasangika Madhyamika view of the middle way view that's taught by our lamas in this Gelug tradition, all phenomena and all persons are all empty of inherent nature. The true nature of all phenomena is that they are empty of existing from their own side, all phenomena. But still, we can make the distinction. So, okay, so a person, so that means we have to realize the emptiness of a cup, the emptiness of a flower, the emptiness of a microphone, the emptiness of a person. So one of the most marvelous methods, as Tsongkhapa says, is the teaching about the two truths. The king of logics, they say, to prove emptiness. There's a multitude of logical reasonings we can and must use to break down all the misconceptions in the mind, but the best one, the king of logics, dependent arising. So this is Tsongkhapa wrote this blissful text in praise of Lord Buddha for his teachings on dependent arising. So let's look at emptiness in the framework of the two truths. So you've got things, so we have things that exist at a conventional level. And conventional is a very nice word. It means by convention, by agreement. This is really powerful. And then those very phenomena have a character of their ultimate nature, which is that they are empty of existing from their own side as this or that. So you first have to posit a thing called a cup, you know? You have to first establish something existing conventionally. And it's then, now you know what you're talking about, you can now look into it to search for the inherent cup that we, because of ignorance, believe exists right there, but which doesn't exist there. So you've got to start with the conventional. So, what's that, mummy? Well, she'll say, well, darling, it's called a cup. We'll say a cup or a mug, whatever. And I'll say, good, mummy, so tell me what it is, please. In other words, she's got to give me the definition. And the definition, you could say, has 2 parts. And the first part tells you its conventional characteristics. So she'll say, well, darling, it's that flat-bottomed clay container. And I can go, yeah, I see that. But this is the point now. But I'm not content yet. But, mummy, what is it? This is a really important question. What is it? What does it do? What is its function? What is its job? Even what is its meaning? She'll say, it holds my tea. Well, don't believe her. We'll believe anything anyone tells us. Look at these conspiracy theories around. So she's got to prove it. So she'll get her tea, she'll get her thermos, she'll get her kettle, and she will pour. And we will both see it holds her tea. It fits the definition, but don't be satisfied yet. So you check in this conventional world that we live in that there's no other definition of this very thing that contradicts that. And once there isn't, we tick the box, we shake hands, and we agree. We have now established validly, conventionally, the existence of a cup. Very comfortable. Now, this is speaking the truth, isn't it? A valid cognition, broadly speaking, a valid cognition is speaking the truth. And a valid cognition is when you have the thought and the thing itself are come together. There's no contradiction. Can you imagine if we all spoke the truth? Can you imagine on this planet, if everything we said was a valid cognition, there'd never be a fight, there'd never be an argument, we'd all be in bliss, you know? Isn't it? Because we all think that what we think is the truth. So we're living in la garbage land. So we've now established simply already this is a cup. So now the problem, now we have to start dealing with the real problem. That's already, now listen, even discovering conventional reality first is a really good step. So in other words, if we could already do that, like I said before, if we can already establish even conventionally what is true and what is not, the world would be a blissful place. So our first step is at least get things conventionally clear. No, it is not a toilet, Robina. It is a cup. It could be a toilet, actually. A little one, it would work. But you see my point? No, so, you know, that is right, that is wrong, he is right, he is wrong, killing is good, killing is bad. There's no agreement on what is real and what is not. So to even get conventionally what is valid, what is not, what is virtue, what is not, that's the bottom line. We'd be in bliss, the whole world, but there's no agreement about even what is true conventionally. So that's what the Lam Rim is really Buddha's presentation of what exists conventionally. That's what it is. Think about it. It's his presentation of conventional reality. There is karma, cause and effect. There's this, there's the lower realms, the upper realms, there's the mind, there's delusions, there's virtues, there's compassion, there's this, there's that. He's presenting his findings of what exists conventionally. And now we get to the final one, the sixth of the six perfections. Now let's get clear the ultimate nature of all of those things. Are we communicating?
Yes.
So delicious. So, what's a person? I always forget the definition, actually. I think it's something like a person. The definition of a person creates karma. Sounds kind of weird, but even if we look at let's look at the mind. Okay, let's look at the mind. What's the mind? Okay, no, before we go there, I won't get confusing. So, okay, we're now looking at a person, and so we have to agree that we are one of those. We're not a cup. We're not a toilet. We treat ourselves like one. We are a person. So we can more broadly say we're a mind possessor, okay? We can't see the mind, it's not physical, but we can see evidence of the presence of a mind. There's noises coming out the mouth that are still warm. We're not turning into caca, you know, so we can deduce we're a person so that we can see very clearly the components of a person are two, body and mind. That's it. Now, if you look at the Vajrayana model, is very nice. According to the Vajrayana, the entire universe consists of two things, matter, and they describe it still in terms of the four elements. We used to use that model in the Middle Ages in our culture, but still they use the model of the matter, physical matter consists of the four elements. And then there are minds. And mind possesses, and this is the Vajrayana model, as His Holiness says, all mind possesses having some or other level of physicality. So in other words, a human, look at us, our body's fairly evident. An animal the same, but a god, you can't see their physical energy, but because of virtue, they're still in samsara, their virtue has grown, their virtuous mind has purified their physical elements to the point where their physical energy is subtle light. And hell being, you could argue, their physical energy is predominantly the fire element, and their mind is conjoined with the fire element. So His Holiness says, the Vajrayana, all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. And then the way the mind works due to karma, how our mind is programmed, that impacts upon the physical energy, and that determines the rebirth and the type of physical body and mind that we get. We create all of that, It's very fascinating. So, okay, a person, a mind possessor, they've got a physical energy and a mind. They're the components. So now, the name self is the term we give to that combination of a body and a mind. So that's why we are one of those. We're a self or a person. A self or a person. We can say like that. We're one of those. So now then what Buddha's saying is, so we can establish as a person, we are one of those. We've established the cup, that's one of those. So then let's look at the person. So what Buddha's saying is that we can establish conventionally we are a person as a correct name. But what we're doing, and the cup and everything else, what we're doing is we're seeing it conventionally true, but we are imposing upon it, or as Lama Zopa says, we are decorating on top of it various characteristics that it just doesn't possess. That's the job of all the delusions, all the misconceptions. There is a validity there. So if you say that is a knife, then you've got it wrong, both conventionally and even ultimately, of course. But if you say it is a cup, at least you got it right conventionally, but you're still mistaking it as an inherent cup. Do you understand? So that's the mistake we have to get rid of, which is far more subtle. But there are other mistakes our mind makes. For example, a simpler mistake is we know that's a cup, but because you're so attached to it, because your grandma gave it to you and it's worth $1,000, you believe it's permanent. So you're imposing a lie on top of this cup. It does not possess permanence. A cup in its nature possesses breakability. We know that. So this is why Buddha says very simply why we suffer, because we believe things have a certain character that they don't have. So there's a disconnect between how things exist and how they appear to us. That's the way we live in samsara. And we don't think we're making a mistake. We think we see a permanent cup. We think we see a very delicious cup if you're attached to it. We think we see a very ugly cup because my boyfriend gave it to it and now Gabriel's cheating on me, so his cup looks ugly as well. We know this. So things do exist. This is why the two truths are so powerful. Things do exist conventionally. But we've got to get that right, what it means. Because the biggest mistake is when we hear that, as Lama Zopa says, when you've understood the emptiness of the cup, when you've looked into the emptiness of the cup, when you've searched for and not found an inherent cup, but what you found instead is the absence of inherent cup, the emptiness of inherent cup. That's a very powerful thing. We've got to look at that. When you've discovered that, it's as if from the side of the cup, there is nothing there. There's not one atom there that makes it cup. When we hear that, then we easily can fall into the abyss of the great mistake, as Tsongkhapa says. And we go, well, there's no cup, nihilism, might as well kill myself. So as soon as we hear the word emptiness, as soon as we hear things are empty, that's the major mistake on the planet. That's the major mistake in understanding emptiness. Even the highly sophisticated yogis can still make that mistake. It's so subtle. But it's delicious. So, don't be scared of it. So at least we want to get the words right first. Conceptuality is a stepping stone to the non-conceptual in the subtlety of meditation. So let's look at these two truths and how they are inextricably linked. Right now we see them as separate. We're like these drunken sailors going between the two extreme views. Oh, everything is empty, therefore there's nothing. Or there is something, how divine, grasp. Both wrong. But though it's hard even intellectually to see how these two don't not only don't contradict, but reinforce each other. So important. So Dharma Zopa says, when you've realized that the emptiness of the cup, the emptiness of the inherent or independent or intrinsic nature of the cup, when you realize that, it's as if there is no cup. But conventionally, there is a cup. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. I find that so delicious, just to hear it. That's the yogi's experience of the two truths together. So let's unpack all this. Okay, so when we go into the one about emptiness, the sixth perfection, to realize the emptiness of the self and everything else, this is one of the key discussions to have. It's seeing it in the framework of the two truths. So first we establish I. Let's use I as the example. We establish person, I, self, me. So we establish conventionally there is a me, there is an I. So you're not complicated. You fit the definition of being a mind possessor or a sentient being, let's say. You fit the definition. Fine. Now, the thing is, as Buddha's telling us, that the root delusion if you've got the three noble, the three poisons, the main ignorance, the main maripa, ignorance, unawareness, is the one that clings to the self-existent, real, solid, definite, inherent, intrinsic, existing in and of itself, established from its own nature, all these synonyms, I. Of course, we don't think we think this. The mistake is so utter, is so absolute, is so ancient, is so totally programmed in our mind, the Buddha would say, for countless lifetimes, that even hearing that we think this is a puzzle to us, because the mistake is so complete, it's so total. It's the root mistake of all. So then on the basis of that, believing and positing and believing and clinging to a self-existent me, then it gives rise, as we've been discussing, to attachment to get what that me wants. And even the attachment at a subtle level is hard enough to see. Forget ignorance, And then when that attachment doesn't get what it wants, as we've been discussing, you have the third poison, the aversion. And the ego grasping is always there. It's never not there, but it's like a sleeping lion most of the time. And the attachment and the aversion are the main players acting out the assumption of a real I. Put it like that. And even the attachment is hard enough to see. As I say, the only time we realize we have attachment to get what we want is when it doesn't get it, is when aversion arises. And that's the problem, So here now we're trying to identify the root delusion, and all this preparation of karma and looking at the mind and then bodhicitta, we haven't gone into that. That's the next step. And then we now are ready, our minds are ready now to start looking at the way ignorance functions. As you can't, so this is where these first two stages of practice are incredible stepping stones to realizing emptiness. So the Buddha teaches, or Tsongkhapa teaches, 3 levels of dependent arising that we need to utilize as logic to argue with ego grasping. There are thousands of ways in which things exist interdependently. It's obvious. There are many ways things have a dependent relationship. Often they'll use that word, relationship. For example, short and long. It's really obvious you can't have short without long. That's a very clear dependent relationship. You can't have past without future. You can't have up without down. They're very clear. Then you have the causal relationship. Now that's karma. Karma is a brilliant example of the first level of dependent arising that Tsongkhapa points out, which is karma, which is the lower scope. So beginning to work with karma, that I am the product of causes that I did, not mummy, daddy, God, and everybody else. Then you start to own responsibility for yourself, which already is loosening the grip of ego grasping, which is the innocent victim me. Already you're loosening it, not explicitly, but that's an inevitable result of really deeply thinking about and meditating and applying karma. It's a brilliant example of the first level of dependent arising, which is here the one called dependent arising of cause and effect, of causality. It's brilliant. Now, the next level of dependent arising is more subtle. Let's look at that one. This next level. So the first one is that everything in the impermanent world is existing in dependence upon causes. Causes within its own continuum. There are external causes and secondary causes, but the key ones are, in terms of a person, the key main causes are the things that I've done in my mind in the past that have programmed my mind or sown seeds in my mind that are now ripening as me and what I think and do and say and experience. This is so powerful. It's a brilliant example of cause and effect, and it's particularly powerful because it already chips away at ego grasping. The next level of dependent arising is that, in this case, I exist in dependence upon parts, bits and pieces. So everything that exists has bits and pieces. Everything exists. And each of these is an argument with the various Hindu views. So the very first one is the argument that there is an essential, inherent, intrinsic Atman that is not the product of causes. Buddha says nonsense. Now the second one is a more subtle mistake, but that there is something that is partless, an inherent, like a partless energy, the Buddha would argue there's nothing that exists can possibly exist without depending upon its bits and pieces. Everything, even the tiniest, I remember reading years ago about all these, they're building all these tunnels to smash the atoms to try and find the fundamental building blocks of the universe. Buddha says you will never find, no matter even when you do these stopwatches now, isn't it? They do, like in the Olympic Games, you've got a thousandth of a second. Even you go down to a 10,000th of a second, even the 10,000ths of a second can be broken down into parts. You will never get to the first one because that's inherent existence. That you cannot have. It's not viable. It's not possible. So, I exist in reality. The self exists in reality, depending upon all its bits and pieces. But the trouble is, this marigpa, this ignorance, totally believes two things. That there is a special piece in here, as my friend Pende says, walking hand in hand with all the other pieces. There's a very special piece that's probably got a golden light around it, and it's got a capital I, very special radiating light, and it's called I, me, self. We believe that totally. And it's like the owner of all the other bits, And our words express that. Our conventional language expresses that. I have anger. I have a nose, we say. We'll go into this. Now, the other mistake we make, which is more subtle, is that we think all of this is I. This is me, And when you look in the sutra teachings of the Lamrim and you see the particular approach to this is the 4-point analysis. So the 4-point analysis, the 4 points are this. Buddha's telling us in advance, Robina, honey child, you're not going to find an I in here, but I need you to search for it to prove there's none, which sounds so weird to us. So if you're going to do that job of searching for the I that Marigpa believes is here, you've got to do 4 things. First, you must establish. If you're going to look for something, you've got to establish very clearly what it is you're looking for. Now, this is odd because if Buddha's already telling us there is no inherent I in here, there is no I in here, then why bother looking? Because we believe there is. You've got to prove it. It's not enough just to believe his words. It's not enough. You've got to prove it to yourself. So the very first step, and this is the hardest one, is to establish clearly in your mind what it is you're searching for. Meaning what, if you can't search for something if you don't know what you're searching for. It's very obvious. It's really clear. But here it's so subtle because he's already telling us in advance there isn't one. But we believe there is. So what we've got to establish in our mind, and this is the most difficult step, is to establish clearly how our I appears to us. And this takes tremendous concentration and effort and skillful awareness. And as Lama Yeshe says in his Mahamudra book, the moment you have established with confidence the wrong I that you think is there, once you've established that second, you will realize the emptiness of it. That's why that first step's the most difficult. So once you've established even theoretically what you think the I looks like, you then have to do the rest of the steps. So the next one is you have to then posit the options. So there's only two options. There either is that I separate from the other parts. It's, you got to establish where that is, and it can only be within the aggregates, because you don't look for an inherent self on a couch or in a cup. You look for an inherent self on the self, the conventional one. That's the aggregates. That's why they say the aggregates, the parts. So there either will be an I that is oneness with the parts, or there will be an I that is separate from the parts. That's the next one. You establish the parameters of your search. The next two are the job of using logic to prove there is no I separate from, and to prove there is no I oneness with. And once you've done that, there is nothing left to do. That's the 4 steps you go through. And this is the point about all this stuff. They talk about when you realize emptiness is like bliss and radiant and wow and far out and space. That's the experience. You've got to do the nuts and bolts of the work, which is intense conceptual logic, which is why you can't do this job properly without single point of concentration. The mind is not powerful enough, but we can still try it, do our best. So let's do the searching. Let's look at the logical inconsistencies of there being an I that's separate from the parts. Okay, let's look at that one. Okay, so now, just conventionally, I can tell you that I have a cup. I don't know what else, and a book. I've got a cup and a book. I'll make a statement, okay? So you hear those words coming out of my mouth, and like I said before, it's good to speak the truth. So straight away, because you know what a book looks like, you see it, you see the shape and color, and you deduce it's a book. You know the definition, and you deduce this as a cup, and you deduce this as a person, right? So there's 3 phenomena. Would you agree? I, cup, book. Very simple. Conventionally, I spoke the truth. What a relief. If I said I've got an elephant in my right hand, we're going to be in trouble. So we're speaking the truth here, right? Very simple. Conventionally, it's easy. Now, let's look at this. These 3 things I just said, and we can see it fairly easily, each of them exist both independently and separately from each other. Very simple. In other words, my cup, for its existence and to hold its tea, to do its job to hold tea, does not depend upon me and does not depend upon the existence of a book, do they? They're 3 separate, independent phenomena. They're easy to see that. If I drop dead, okay, I've put a cup down first, and then I drop dead, the cup still holds tea. My book works fine. So in that sense, they're they're independent of each other. Dependence means there's some relationship. You could argue that's my cup. Then if you say that, that's fine, there's some relationship. But in general, to do their job, I to do my job of being a person, this to do its job of holding tea, that to do its job of, holding words or whatever you say. There's no relationship. Easy, no relationship. So that's easy. So therefore, you point out three separate things. Simple. Now, I will tell you that I have a nose and an ear. And now, without analysis, because you know that the sound coming out of the mouth over here is known as I, and then you say, I have a nose and an ear, and you look quickly and you recognize it's true. She spoke the truth. No analysis, it's true. But what we don't realize we're doing is we are seeing three, we are actually, okay, let's look, how many phenomena is that? Well, it's three as well, isn't it? I said three nouns, didn't I? I said three nouns. One's a pronoun. So that means there are three phenomena. That's correct, is it not? There are three phenomena. There are three, right? And we have to be able to point them out as separate and independent. Now, in a central sense, nose and ear are separate and independent. So nose to function to breathe air doesn't need an ear in a simple sense, right? Do you understand me? And equally the same, opposite. And so that's two. So they both exist. Easy. Now, where is the third phenomenon? Where we have to point to the third phenomenon that doesn't depend upon the existence of an ear and a nose. Now, that's what a soul is. That's what an Atman is. They point to one. They say there is one in here somewhere. And Buddha says, no, there ain't. This is a simple mistake. Are we communicating? But we believe there is. Look how we feel every day, like we're carrying around this special, it's known as I this, and I have this, and I want this, and I am this, and how dare you take my nose and you insult me. This is the main word in our mind. Now, very simply, when you think you say a word, you're referring to something. We never analyze it for 1 second. And this is the first mistake. We really do believe there is a special little me in there that if we were to search, we never think to, we would find it, this little golden thing. It feels like that. When someone insults you, this is where the mistakes get mixed up. Or for example, let's say Gabriel says, Robina, I don't like your nose. And I'll say, how dare you insult me? He'll be very truthful. Robina, I didn't insult your eye. I insulted your nose. And if there were, as Lama Zopa says, if there were a separate little me in here, when it hears Gabriel say, I don't like your nose, the me will go, oh, phew, I'm glad Gabriel doesn't insult me. Poor old nose, but be feeling very unhappy. This is hilarious to us. We puzzle because we assume there's an I. We can't even get out. We can't even hear it, This is the analysis we have to do. We have to search, literally. So one of the meditations is to literally unpack the components of an I. So you put all the pieces of the body, you do it literally in your mind, one piece at a time. You unpack, you sort of de-IKEA your table. You understand? You pull the pieces apart and you put them all in front. And until you have exhausted every tiny piece. So the logic we believe is we put all the bits of the body and all the bits of the mind, and there's the I that's been hiding inside, finally been exposed. There it is, No, you won't find one. That's why I like the IKEA example as the opposite. We know very well, so you go online and you're searching for, you're going to buy a nice new I, a person. And you see this really nice Robina, so you go to IKEA to buy a Robina. I mean, get my point, it's a nice one. So we know you're going to be disappointed because you open the bloody box and all these 4,000 parts. You've got to build your own, But it's a really good, it's like this other meditation in reverse. So we know they've built the table in advance. So when they give you the box, they know exactly, this is a really important point, they know exactly how many pieces you need to make up the table. You don't get 4.5 legs and 19 screws and cross your fingers. They've made the table, they've unpacked it and put each piece exactly in the box. So the same with the person. They put all the pieces in, the millions of pieces of the body, the liver, the kidneys, the knees, the eyes, the atoms. There's millions of pieces. You know that. And then they've got the pieces of your mind, the anger, the love, the kindness, the subtle mind, gross mind, sensory, the thousands of pieces of parts of your consciousness. You see my point? So you gradually unpack and you're building a Robina gradually. You're building the person. You're putting the pieces together until eventually it functions as Robina. But you're getting a shock because you keep panicking because you're not finding the little Ziploc bag with the gold writing I on it. Because the assumption we have is, of course you need an I. Who makes the decisions otherwise? Of course you need an I. An I runs the show. We say that. But you won't find one. And you know what? You ring IKEA in a panic. No, darling, you don't need an extra I. And they'll tell you on the phone, we have discovered that all the pieces together function as Robina. Because it's a mere name. That's the final one. It's merely a name. The parts function as a cup. But we want this extra component called cupness. That's the delusion. That's the mistake our gross delusion, our ignorance makes, We exaggerate the very ontological status itself of the cup, the person, the microphone. We decorate on top of it things that it doesn't possess and don't need, which of course is scary as hell because it sounds like, oh my God, there's no I, panic, Are we communicating? This is the gross mistake. This is why I've got to have the words clear first. Definitions, names, labels, accurate. We know that when you want to make a cake, you don't just cross your fingers and chuck in a few eggs and cross your fingers. You have a clear theory based on a person who's made a cake and they measure exactly. So you got to know what eggs are, what a teaspoon is, and then you'll get your cake. Same here. This analysis is so important, You've got to squeeze your brain, as Lamieti says. So that's the thing about when we say words have to refer to something. So when we say I am Robina, no argument, with no analysis, it's fine. It's a truth. But what we don't realize when we say it, we're saying the word I with the assumption of there being an inherent I. We make that's a mistake. So we have the I as the owner, which is the first one, and the subtle one, the other one, which is the steps to finally me label. But the next one is all of it's I. So that's a hard one to see. As Lama Zopa says, the I, the name, the label cannot be the base. The label I cannot be the parts. The label cup cannot be the parts. The label cup cannot be the parts. And so one argument is this. So let's look at the definition of a cup. Okay. Let's look at the definition of a cup. First one is its parts. It's made of parts. It's got no, forget that. Let's look at the eye. So the eye's got two main parts, you could argue, isn't it? The body and the mind. The body and the mind. Two parts, the body and the mind. So we say a thing called an I has two parts, body and mind. Now then we go, so when we're looking for the self, one of the arguments has to be, you start looking and you go, well, is the I the mind? Is the I the body? So if we come up with anything, we'll surely think, well, at least the I has to be the mind. It's one of the commonest ones we think. The I has to be the mind. Now, if the I is the mind, that means, this is the point they say, if you've either got one thing or more than one. So if you say the I is the mind, that means they are synonymous. That means you cannot possibly see a difference. They're two words, but they'd have to be the same thing. The I would have to be the mind. Do you understand me? If the I is the mind. So if that's true, then what happened to the body? Hey, I'm here, body. I need a role. Where's my role? Hey. Oh, well, that's the I too. Oh, you got two eyes, have you? I see. It seems kind of abstract, but it's very true. Your I can't be the mind if the I is a part of the I. If the mind is the part of the I. You can't have it both ways. The base cannot be the name. It can't be. So the owner, if there were the owner, there'd have to be a relationship. So the eye would, so then that eye, if you insult the ear, if you cut the ear off and the nose and the ear and the nose have a relationship, the nose will be affected too. So if the eye is also part of is one of the parts, there has to be a relationship, but there's no relationship. In a simple sense, in terms of their function, this can go deaf, but you'll still breathe. This can stop breathing, you'll still be able to hear. In that simple sense, there's no relationship. In the simple sense. So if there's an eye, it won't be affected. It won't be affected when the leg gets cut off. The eye will be sitting there merrily happy. Oh, poor leg, We don't it's like that. And then if the eye is oneness with the parts, then you've got more than one eye, because you can't have it. You can't, if you've got parts, each part that exists has to be equivalent to the eye. So as many parts as you posit is as many eyes. That's just not viable, I mean, these seem kind of as if they're just being clever. But because ignorance is a conception, it's the root, deepest, most primordial concept, you have to argue with it using valid concepts. Using logic. Because delusions are irrational. They're nonsense. They're made up rubbish that have no basis in reality. So you use valid concepts, which are valid, that have a basis in reality, conventionally, to argue with them. So I need good concentration and a lot of merit, a lot of purification, because we cling to our beliefs, we cling to our anger, we cling to our nonsense misconceptions, we hold on to them as such truth, scary to let go of them. So the key thing to understand is all these misconceptions have the character of fear. Ego grasping especially is the root fear. It's like the sleeping lion. And when it awakens, when you're really threatened and you have a complete panic attack, like we call that instinct for survival. That's a panic attack, complete panic attack. Well, all the delusions are in the nature of panic. Anger is, oh my God, that should not be happening. Make it go away. If that's not a panic attack, I don't know what it is. That's what anger is. Attachment's a panic attack every second. All the delusions are panic attack. They're all rooted in fear because they are misconceptions. They're wrong beliefs. The thing you think is there isn't. That's why you get a shock. Whereas you've got valid concepts, even conventionally, love and compassion, not even emptiness yet, you'll be blissfully happy because you're in sync with reality conventionally. And there's a sense of interdependence there, So before we go further on this is only just beginning the topic. Any questions?
I have a question.
Good, Nicole, go on.
Yeah. I'm confused about what valid means.
Okay, good. Valid means that if you say 1 + 1 is 2, and so you have to study science. First, you have to know the meaning of those words. So you study mathematics, and then according to the conventions of mathematics, you can discover conventionally that's what is agreed upon. That you have one thing and you have another thing, and you put them together, and that equals 2. You have to. It's not an ultimate truth. You've got to have first establish a series of theories called mathematics, and then you base it. You compare it with that, and it fits the definition. That's what a valid cognition is. So if you say, I am Robina, that's a valid cognition because you've been named Robina. If you change your name legally, then you can change it, and that's a valid cognition. 1 and 1 is 3 is not a valid cognition. So an object seen through the lenses of attachment, because attachment is not a valid cognition because it causes you to see something that's not there. It causes you to see an inherent delicious cake, and that thing doesn't exist. So an invalid cognition is where there's a disconnect between the thought and the thing.
So is anger not valid?
Oh, no, none of it. No, okay, that's a good point. The way you ask it, it sounds like, aren't I allowed to have anger? Valid
No.
Okay, good. No, none of the delusions are valid. By definition, they are misconceptions. This is why it's so important to understand what we call emotions are rooted in being misconceptions. all the delusions, all the afflictions. So there's different kinds of misconceptions. One misconception in the simple sense is 1 + 1 is 3. Conventionally speaking, that's not a valid cognition. Then there's, for example, there is no karma. That is not a valid cognition. Buddha says, he says, saying there's a creator is not a valid cognition. Saying there's no cause and effect is not a valid cognition. So we've got to agree there's a set of principles that you present. You can't just pluck it out of the air and say it's valid because I like it. You've got to relate it to something. So if you're playing music, you're playing Bach's music. The only way to know whether you played the note valid or not is by looking at the music. It's not just, oh, it feels nice. That's how we tend to think about our mind. Oh, it feels nice, therefore it's valid. Valid has to be related to a set of conventional presentations. Are you seeing the point?
I had a teacher tell me that my feeling was valid, but it could be valid but delusional.
No, precisely. So, well, I mean, I wouldn't.
I don't.
That makes us feel like we're sort of giving ourselves the permission to be angry. We don't need to do that. I mean, we don't need to. No, what he means is it is true that there does exist an affliction. It is true that I am angry. That's not valid, not so much valid as true. It's a fact that I'm angry. That's a fact. But what anger thinks is happening isn't true. That's the point.
So the experience of it
it's very
is
true.
valid,
very real.
but it's delusional.
I wouldn't put valid. I'd say true.
Okay.
It's true. Anger is true. My feelings are true. My feelings are real and true. They're totally genuine and existing. That is a fact. But what they're thinking is happening isn't true. That's the big distinction to make. Yes, absolutely. You're right, Nicole.
To follow up with that, are there any valid emotions?
Yeah, love, compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness, joy, all these, oh, absolutely, all the virtues. They are valid cognitions, absolutely, because they're not based on they're not rooted in I. Okay, they're still, okay, until you've realized emptiness. I can say, let's say we start off being angry with each other, you and me, Shuyang. I think Shuyang did this and I think Robina did that. So we have all these invalid cognitions. You believe I did a bad thing. I believe you did. Then we discover this truth and we start to forgive each other. And now we only have virtue. Those virtuous thoughts, may Shuyang be happy, may Robina be happy. They are valid concepts because they're rooted in dependent arising. In the simplest sense, there's a feeling of connectedness between us. But they're still not true until we realize emptiness, because there's still a sense of inherent Robina having inherent love for inherent Shuyang. So there's still that mistake to go. So the first step is at least get the valid cognitions, which is the virtues. Then we can get rid of the root delusion. One step at a time. Do you understand? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Eric.
Not trying to be clever here.
Now be clever, Eric. Come on.
So what gets reincarnated?
Can't hear you, darling.
What gets reincarnated? There's no inherent self.
What?
What's being reincarnated?
Good, darling. You yourself. But this is the point, Eric. You're not being, you're being exactly the right question. And that question because we have the assumption, Eric, that if there is a self, we think when we hear there's no inherent self, what you just did, and this is what we do, we throw the baby out with the bathwater and say there's no self at all. There is an Eric, but not existing from its own side. There is an Eric, but not existing inherently. So thinking Eric is empty doesn't throw out Eric. It throws out, in other words, thinking that a cake is delicious in its nature. When you stop having attachment, the cake doesn't disappear. There's still a cake there, but not the fantasy cake. You hear? So there is an Eric, there is a cake, there is a chair, there is up, there is down, there is ++1. But we add on top of it these extra components based on attachment and anger and ego grasping. We put all these rubbish on top. We decorate it with nonsense that isn't there. So stripping away the lies from how we see things, what in the end we will discover our true self, our true nature, which is in the nature of bliss and clarity and virtue, no longer a sense, no longer fear, no longer delusions, no longer separate from others. It'll be clear and radiant, and you'll finally get joy and bliss when you discover your true self. unadorned with all the rubbish, you know. Do you understand? You understand a bit? Got a taste? Good.
Small things.
That's it, darling. That's all that matters. Yeah, yes, go, hang on. Go. This gentleman, yeah, go. Here.
Matter is in parts.
Matter what?
So matter is in parts.
Matter is in parts.
And mind is in parts.
Everything that exists is made of parts.
Is Buddha nature also?
Everything that exists has its part. So you could argue this moment of Buddha nature is, and then the next moment of Buddha nature, and the next moment of Buddha nature. You could argue in that sense, there's parts of Buddha nature. Yes, it's quite abstract, but yes. Yes, it does. Everything that exists has parts. Even emptiness. This moment of emptiness and that moment of emptiness. Everything that exists has to have, it's not, in other words, it's not, if it didn't have parts, this is what we've got to understand, it can't shift, can't move, can't change. In fact, it can't even exist from the Buddha's way of seeing it. So it's quite a subtle point. You understand? Yes, Jan.
Could you go over, I need to hear it, valid cognition?
Yeah.
Now, is that based in, I need to hear it again, the valid and what?
It's very simple. A valid, okay, first of all, okay, what our trouble in the West, where we think about when we look into our mind, what we think is, I want to see what's in my mind. And because it's there, somehow we treasure it. And because it's there, we think, well, I'm allowed to feel this. And it feels rather mean to think that I'm having a thing that's not a valid cognition. But it is valid. I'm feeling it. That's why Nicole's point was so clear. So all Buddha's saying, it's sort of like if you're trying to play music. Okay, one of the commonest things we say is, how do I know what I'm thinking is right? How do I know what I'm thinking is wrong? Do you understand me? And we don't think that we need something out there to be a reference point for us. So how do you know when okay, my question to you now is, when you're playing music, how do you know if you played the valid note? How do you know?
Well, what I remember you saying is you look at the.
Yeah, that's right. So first of all, most people say, well, it feels right. No, open your eyes, look at the music and go, did I play the right note? So what is valid and invalid isn't some absolute kind of moralistic thing, I'm allowed to think it. It's nothing to do with that. Is it valid within that framework of those set of laws?
Oh.
That's what valid means. It's a referential thing. It's a dependent arising. It's not an absolute valid, good or bad, wow, 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 you know. We're very nihilistic in how we think about things. You see my point?
Yeah,
so here it's within the framework of what Buddha is establishing. We have to prove it, not just believe it. What is valid, what is virtue, and what is not. Or even more simple, therefore, a valid cognition is when there's the thought of it, it's in sync with the thing. Because when you say a word, it's referring to something. Yeah. It's referring to something. It's referential. Language is an expression of something. So if you're talking in terms of math, you've got to know what you're talking about before you say it's right. You can say, oh, I can believe 1 + 1 is 7. Well, yes, you can. But it won't help you because you go shopping and you'll be disappointed if you think if I want 1 + 1, you get 2. You'll be disappointed. So it's a practical issue. So when I say to my boyfriend's name, what is it? Gabriel, I love you. He thinks, and he says, I love you. We think we're speaking the same language. No, we're talking 2 different languages because mine is riddled with attachment. I think he should take care of me. That's my definition. But his maybe is another definition. No wonder we fight. We don't have any agreement on anything.
So valid cognition is, the relationship is like an agreement.
No, the first step, no, not even an agreement. No, yeah, it's based on that. Basically, conventional. It's a good term. Conventional truth is what we agree. It's not an absolute. We think there's an absolute good, absolute bad, absolute valid. No such thing. It's a relational thing.
Okay,
You
so-
can't just say, oh, math. You can't just say, oh, virtue. You have to agree upon what it is. Say the name, fit the definition, and then prove it to be true. And then when you say love is defined as this, and then I say I love you and he loves me, we can agree that we're speaking the truth. It's a valid. So it's got to be. So then so it is a conventionally put together agreement of what real is. Conventional agreement is by agreement. What is a cup? Who created a cup? What is a cup? It's nothing other than what we as a culture have come to agree upon over centuries and centuries of drinking our tea. There's no further more cup than that.
Mhm.
So that is a cup. And once we've established it and proved it, we can agree that's a valid cognition. When I say, pass me the cup, and you'll pass me the cup. Phew, we're speaking the truth to each other. So when I say love, we have to have a definition first and agree upon it. And then we have to do what we think is fitting the definition. I want you to be happy and I'll make you happy. Then we have to know what happy means. Let's get a definition. Then we have to know what I is. We got to get a definition. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
So 1 + 1 is 2. Now, anger. So Buddha is dividing all the emotion, all the emotional things within us into our states of mind. No, all states of mind into misconceptions, valid conceptions, and in terms of the virtues and non-virtues, which in their nature have different characteristics. One is that they're afflicted because they're painful. And the subtler one is they're painful because they're habitual, but they are based upon a concept deep in the bones of our being that we've developed a belief in. So attachment is defined as a thought that exaggerates the deliciousness of, let's say, the cake. And you've built that up over centuries and centuries of lifetimes. And then by the point when you've got the emotional hunger in here that has believed totally when it sees that brown triangle, it doesn't just see chocolate cake. That's a valid cognition. But the cake that my attachment is seeing is a fantasy cake. It's not it's a divine, delicious cake, kind of like dripping with deliciousness in the cake. That cake does not exist on that plate. When I'm angry with Gabriel for leaving me, I see an ugly Gabriel. I see a real ugly Gabriel, as if ugliness is coursing in his veins with his blood. And that's the Gabriel that I see. When we all see Mr. Trump and we don't like him, we see ugly, evil Mr. Trump. We paint that whole person with that one brush. There's no space in our mind to see anything else. It's so absolute. That's how we live our lives. So this doesn't mean that Mr. Trump isn't lying, but the Mr. Trump we see is an exaggeration of anger in the mind, which is a concept that exaggerates the ugliness of something. So every delusion has that function. They exaggerate the delusion. So that in that pure, simple sense, they are not a valid cognition. Are we communicating?
Yeah, they're the most helpful.
The key one about the emotional afflictions, that's why in the middle scope they only go on about the afflictions, but the deeper function, when you start to look into the mind, which is help us prepare us for emptiness, is to realize it's rooted in you study low rig and you hear the definition of love is a concept that wants others to be happy. That's valid. That's a valid concept. That's a valid concept that we have to grow because it makes me happy and makes others happy. And the attachment that's polluting my love is an invalid concept that exaggerates and distorts the person called Gabriel and makes him look more delicious than he really is. It has all this expectation that he should give me happiness. So it's setting myself up for a complete disaster because it's just not true. That's the point about an invalid concept. It's just not true. It's not true. Valid isn't a moralistic issue. It's a practical one. It's scientific. It's like you're colorblind. You're colorblind. You see a yellow cup, but it's called blue, so it's not a valid cognition. That's an easy mistake. Attachment is like I said, you got a $50 note, but for countless lifetimes you're seeing 500. So it appears to you as 500, and you believe it's 500, and you expect 500's worth. What the hell do you think the result will be? Is bitter disappointment. That's what samsara is. Are we communicating?
Yeah, we're communicating.
Good.
Thank you.
So here the discussions of valid concepts we're discussing is Buddha's analysis of the mind. It's not Jung or Freud. We've got to understand that what valid means here is within Buddha's framework. We have got to buy into that framework first, like with math. I mean, if you're learning music and you suddenly, you play Bach and then you suddenly play an Indian violin, they're two separate systems. You can't, or acupuncture says stick a needle here and another doctor says don't do that, it'll make you sick. I mean, you've got to decide your system first. It's referential. Everything is referential. Everything's dependent arising. That's what conventional reality is. Are we communicating? What was your question? Bit louder,
When
can't
I've
hear.
been- Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
When I've been led in a emptiness meditation or copy them, whether by Lama Zopa Rinpoche or
Yeah.
Glenn Svensson, right? And they give what you're helping me see even more clearly now. I then feel a little bliss or joy,
That's right.
and then I kind of bliss out.
That's
I
right.
Soften,
Wonderful.
but I'm not holding on to. But I'm not holding on to the realization I just had. I kind of think, oh, this is emptiness.
Yes.
And it's not yet. I haven't done the work.
No, but it's okay. But it is. It's all one part of it's all part of the process. I mean, when you just you get that you're here like you're making a cake. You learn to make a cake for the first time, and for the first time you suddenly realize the relationship of the eggs and the flour. You go, oh, I get it. It's a nice little moment. Don't hold on to it. It'll grow. It'll grow. It'll grow.
Right. So rather than hold on to it, keep doing the work.
Just keep doing it, and it'll get deeper and deeper every time you do it. It goes a bit deeper next time.
Now, do the Buddhists posit what happens when we are all Buddhists? Is there?
Well, of course, when we're all Buddhas,
Is
there'll
there
be.
a conventional reality?
No, okay, there are all Buddhas, all living in the Dharmakaya. There's no reason for gross bodies because there's no one to help. So we'd all be living, blissing out in the subtlest level of existence of the Dharmakaya throughout there'd be no universe, but there would only be Dharmakayas wherever there is existence. There can't be anything else. That's it. This is bliss. Trillions of minds all experiencing Dharmakaya. That's it.
So we don't need to worry about parts anymore.
Well, no, you've still got parts. Whatever exists has parts.
Oh.
Even permanent phenomena have parts. By definition, that's the fundamental one. Everything has parts and everything is merely labeled. Not everything has cause and effect.
So even in ultimate reality.
Even in ultimate reality has parts. But it's not like, oh, there's a bit of a Dharmakaya here, and there's a bit, they're going to put them together. It's parts in terms of moments. That's all. Not parts in terms of lumps.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, darling.
So now that I know John has his moment of
Yeah.
enlightenment.
No, a moment of joy when
Okay.
when the penny drops for a second. Wonderful moments. Keep them and they grow. Go on.
Yeah, you might be able to help me.
Yeah.
Because when I had my meditation on emptiness before, I start to have this image of maybe seeing
A bit louder.
seeing everything as just infinite number of elements being put together because of karma. So there's no inherent nature of good or bad, but that applies to all beings or even just any chair or desk out there.
A bit cosmic for me. It's a bit cosmic for me. I don't quite. I mean, if okay,
Is
the
that
best.
right?
I'm not
Okay.
quite. I can't quite get it. Say it again in a different way.
So is it the right way to experience emptiness when I see things or all beings as just a pile of infinite number of
I understand. I think good enough. When you have a sense of spacious and connectedness, good enough, darling. Good enough.
so that's okay.
Good. Don't get too concrete about the words. It's good enough. Keep going.
Oh.
Yeah. When you have a realization of emptiness, I mean, it can all kinds of levels and levels. The final one, of course, that's only in single point of concentration when it's non-conceptual, and the seed is the root seed is cut. That's when, as Zopa says, when the greatest yogis finally, it dawns on them for the first time directly, not conceptually, directly, that there is no inherent I. I mean, these are the words, right? So it's then he says for the middle yogis, for the pretty good yogis, but not the best ones, it's incredible fear. Fear they've never known the likes of. But it's good. But the greatest yogis have incredible bliss. But from that second, you can't go back. From that second, you can only go forward now. You can't go back. You can't go back. I mean, I don't know the words, whatever, when you hear the lamas, how they talk about it, the yogis have the experience of it. But that's why you've got to have incredible understanding intellectually of the teachings, because when you're doing all these meditations, you're not just blissing out in space, but you've got this subtle analysis constantly there, subtle analysis. Always kind of like, as Lama Yeshe says, it's like the mind, the little fish, the way Panchen Rinpoche talks about how when you're in single point of concentration in Mahamudra, you get this subtle wisdom, this subtle awareness, very subtle, like a fish moving through water without disturbing it. So Lama so beautifully talks about it as your mindfulness fish. Subtly, this is Tsongkhapa's approach. Subtly just watching, observing, checking that the meditation is going in the right way. So it's an incredibly sophisticated level of utilizing very subtle conceptuality until you've got the final realization. I'm just talking here, okay, how the lamas talk. So any experience we can have of being connected to others, of things being spacious, this is very nice. This is good. Wait, keep going though. Or just joy. Keep going, keep going. So the other thing that's really important, now let's take a different tack now. We've got to look at the use of this word emptiness, which is what really throws us, Because in a simple sense of language, we say there is something and then there's nothing. They seem to be opposites. So as soon as we hear empty, it means nothing. That's where the big mistake is. So let's look at this carefully. Okay, now, when you study Buddhist philosophy, like you study Dura, collected topics, you learn all the nuts and bolts of just what exists, like the Buddhist worldview, cause, effect, this, that, various synonyms, there's mind, divided, there's matter, 6 divisions, 5 of this. It's the whole kind of presentation of the Buddha's way of seeing the world, which is coming from India before. So the very first one is you learn the different terms for that which exists. It's a hugely important point for the Buddha, because right now we're saying we're living in la-la land, cognizing things that don't exist. So he wants us to cognize that which does exist, and that's finally omniscience. So there's several synonyms: phenomenon, object, object of knowledge, existent, established base. At least these 5. They're all terms used to refer to that which exists. So now, there's 2 kinds of things that exist. Simple terms that they use, and these throw us: the impermanent phenomena, and then what they call permanent phenomena. And that confuses us, because we think permanent means existing forever, but that's not the meaning. So Alex Berzin uses the term abstract, and that's much tastier. So and give an example. I mean, like, okay, this is now the example. So emptiness itself is one of the examples of a permanent phenomenon. So if we think of it as an abstract phenomenon, it's easier. So let's think a really simple example of, as Lama Zopa calls it, an ordinary emptiness. So I will say, I will go to drink my tea. Then I'll go, oh, my cup is empty. We'll say that, won't we? We know that term. And we know, because you know what a cup is, it holds tea. Then when I say it's empty, you know I'm not saying it's empty of dollars or empty of cake. It's empty of tea. We know that. So so that's an ordinary emptiness. So now let's look at these words. Every word we say has to be a phenomenon. a thing that exists. It's got to be a valid cognition. If it's a valid cognition, it refers to something that exists, right? You look puzzled. Can you hear that?
I can hear. it, of
Okay,
course.
so listen. A valid cognition, I say there is a cup. We've agreed conventionally it's a flat bottom container that holds the tea, and we've proved it's true. So we all shake hands and agree it's a cup, yeah? So then I'll say, then there is a cup of tea. So we'll say that is tea. So now I pour my tea, and we say there is tea in my cup. Now that's two phenomena, you agree? One is called tea, one is called cup. And we know the definition, and we prove it's true. And now I suddenly say, oh, there's no tea in my cup. Or I'll say, oh, my cup is empty, won't we? So I think the way to put it here, I'm saying this, the mind cognizes nouns. You listen to this. A noun is I. They always talk about things, actions, and events. That's how the mind cognizes things. So turn, oh, there is no tea in my cup, into a thing. And that's called absence of tea. Can you hear that word? So my mind is cognizing the phenomenon that does exist called absence of tea. Can you hear that? Can you hear that? Not there is no tea, nihilism, but it's a real phenomenon that my mind can cognize called absence of tea. Can you hear that? Can you hear that? It's a real thing that does exist in my cup. It's a way of saying it. The absence of tea. So if everything exists, it's got to exist somewhere. So where does tea exist? Well, in my cup. Where does the absence of tea exist? Not just, oh, there's no tea, like in the world somewhere. It's in my cup. Now, let's get this emptiness. There is a person called Robina. There is validly a person called Robina, conventionally, and she's looking for this inherent I that she thinks existing in there. Do you understand? And let's say she has a realization that there is no, oh my God, there's no inherent I. Well, turn that into a noun. I just cognize the real phenomenon called absence of inherent Robina. It's a real phenomenon that does exist. Now, where does it exist? Where does the phenomenon called emptiness of Robina exist? Where does it exist? It's a question, a real question. Where does it exist?
Well, within, is it in the mind? I mean,
Okay, where does the absence of tea exist?
in the cup.
Okay, good. Where does the absence of Robina exist?
Body.
In Robina.
In Robina.
Not in the body, Robina. The person. The parts of a person are called body and mind.
Right.
The person's called Robina. The phenomenon is called Robina. And Robina's looking for the inherent Robina, and she discovers the absence of it. So that absence, so emptiness of inherent existence isn't, oh, there's no Robina. Where is there no Robina? Right here on Robina that does exist. This is the two truths. So emptiness is a real phenomenon that does exist, is the point I'm trying to make. It's not there's nothing. That's nihilism. And that's the commonest mistake we make. Absence of tea is a real thing you can see in the cup, but it's conceptual. You can't touch emptiness of tea. You can't taste emptiness of tea. You can't smell emptiness of tea. It's an abstract idea, but it's very real cognition. Can you see the point? So emptiness exists, and it's not nothing exists. It's not nothingness. It's the absence, as to Eric's point. There is an Eric that does exist, but there is no inherent Eric. So Eric has to discover the absence of that Eric.
Okay.
And is that what gets reincarnated?
What?
Is that what gets reincarnated?
Your consciousness, Eric's consciousness, which is also empty, will get reincarnated. Eric's body will go into caca and dust in the ground, but Eric's continuity of consciousness combined with his own subtle elements will carry on with all the imprints of everything Eric has done and carry on and take another life. And you know why he can do that? Because Eric is empty. Something that's not empty can't move, can't exist, can't do anything. So because we are empty of existing inherently, we therefore exist conventionally. That's the two truths together. But the thing I'm getting to here is the use of the word emptiness isn't a nothingness. It's referring to the absence of something. I use the ordinary example all the time. You look in the bank and you think you're expecting $5,000 and you get the shock of your life. Oh my God, where is my $5,000? There might be $0. You don't see $0. You see the absence of your precious $5,000. So emptiness there refers to the absence of your $5,000. It's a real thing for you. And where does that absence of $5,000 exist? Right where you thought there should be $5,000. Where's the absence of tea exist? Right where you think there should have been tea. Where's the absence of Eric? Right where you thought Eric was. In here somewhere floating around between your two nipples. Are we communicating? So as it was said, Lord Buddha tells us in the Heart Sutra, basically he's sitting there blissing out in meditation on emptiness. And then his two disciples, Avalokitesvara in 10th level bodhisattva form, and Shariputra having a conversation. Well, Shariputra asks a question, and the rest of the sutra is Avalokitesvara telling it. But it's really Buddha channeling his teachings into their minds. So basically, he takes the different categories of phenomena that exist, the 5 aggregates, the 18 constituents, the 4 noble truths, the 12 links, and says we've got to look at each one of them in this way. And so then he says, he takes the first of the 5 aggregates, form, which is referring to our physical, that's all. And he says, form is empty. Then he says, emptiness is form. And then he says, emptiness is nothing other than form, and form is nothing other than emptiness. Okay, they've got different levels of meaning, but the simplest point is what I've just been saying. Where you find form, or it could be Robina, or carpet, or kakar, or computer, any phenomenon you like, you point to the phenomenon, and right there, that form possesses the characteristic of absence of inherent form. Right there. So in other words, it's not as if it's form and then emptiness somewhere else. When we say, oh, everything is empty, it's true, but we go, oh, it's just like big space, there's nothing. But you've got to find, where else but, where would you search for inherent Robina? Where would you search for inherent I? Not on the bloody computer or the cup or the toilet. Here on the aggregates, because that's where you think the I is. So you search where you think the I is, and then you will find the absence of it right where you thought it should have been. You see my point? So you can't have I without emptiness. You can't have form without emptiness. It's schizophrenic and demented, because emptiness of inherent existence is simply a characteristic of what exists conventionally. Are we communicating? It's just learning how to use the words, that's all, But the other point here is, they don't often say it, but I think it's so powerful. The only person who's going to notice the absence of tea in your cup is the person who expects tea. If I look in your bank account and I tell you there's $0, I'm not shocked. I don't see the absence of $5,000 because I'm not expecting $5,000. You don't walk into the department store and go, oh, mummy, there's no tea in the cups. You don't expect tea, So it's really powerful. The only person who's going to see the absence of the I, the yogi, is the person who expects it. And of course, we've all got the assumption that there is one. That's why it's so shocking. We all have the assumption that there is an independent I, and it's so subtle. And so really getting the shock when you finally discover it's not there, actually discover it, this is tremendously powerful, when it dawns on you.
So is expectation or anticipation?
All that's a function of attachment.
Okay.
So all attachment, completely attachment.
They're not valid. I
What?
do understand that you can believe something.
What, tell me?
I do understand the concept of belief,
What do you mean by that? Belief? I don't understand. What do you mean?
Well, sometimes I cognize, let's say, a sign on the highway. I think it says something. And then when I look again, I see what's actually there.
Okay, so then?
Whatever that.
Okay, I understand. So the point is?
And the point is that I've overlaid onto what's actually there.
It's true. So what's the point you're making?
Geez, I don't know.
I think I can hear what you're saying here. So this is the thing that we're doing all the time that we don't realize we're doing. And because the mistakes are countless lifetimes old, they're completely primordial habits. That's why it's hard to unpack. That's why it's hard to even see attachment. Forget ignorance, which is the subtlest one, you know. So we have to have the theories first. Conceptuality is a stepping stone. Don't ever throw out conceptuality. The theory of how to make the cake leads you to the taste of the cake. You know, you've got to have the right theory first. It's so important. So this use of the word emptiness, so especially the one of everything the mind can cognize, it's a phenomenon. So whatever the mind can cognize, if it's a valid cognition, then that thing exists. And so there are two kinds of phenomena, those that are impermanent, which are the things you can see, taste, touch, smell, and even the mind is impermanent because it's changing moment by moment. So then the other phenomena, abstract, as Berzin calls them, meaning then the real point about permanent here, the way they use the word, is that they're not changing moment by moment, which sounds very abstract to us, but it's true. You can't see or taste or touch or smell the absence of tea. It's not just playing with words either. It's a very real thing that you cognized. Now, the absence of tea is a disappointing absence, isn't it?
Mm.
The absence of $5,000, and you don't like that one. The absence of an eye is the best thing in the planet. Or let's say you've been to the doctor and I'm married to Gabriel and we're young and got 7 kids and we're happy and I suddenly get I've got cancer, I've got 6 months to live. I'm going to have the shock of my life. I'll be devastated when I discover I'm going to die. So I'm freaking out and dealing with it and pain and suffering. And I go back to my doctor and she says, oh, I made a mistake, Robina. I gave you the wrong x-rays. You haven't got cancer. Well, I just discovered the absence of cancer. That's a blissful absence, isn't it? You see my point here?
Mm.
So this is ordinary absences. We know about, we just don't call it that. That's a lovely absence to discover you haven't got cancer. You're like you have a party, you know. Except like a friend of mine went to Los Angeles to help his daddy who was dying of cancer. And he got better and they had a party and next day he died of a heart attack. So you can't win, you know. Don't get excited for too long. The real point I'm making here is that emptiness is a real phenomenon that does exist. That's the point I'm trying to get to. It's a phenomenon that does exist. It's just abstract, but it's real. We have experiences of it all the time. When Gabriel leaves me, this is a really good, simple example of an emptiness. Gabriel leaves me for a younger version, right? And I'm there every day. And all I notice in the house is the absence of Gabriel, isn't it? I mean, all I feel, the whole house is pervaded by the absence of Gabriel, based on the need for Gabriel, the expectation, the hurt, the anger, the attachment, all the fantasies. It's a real absence. Now, you visit me, you've never heard of Gabriel. You will never notice the absence of Gabriel. So it's clear the absence of something is related directly to the person and their expectations and their mind and their rubbish, you know, or their goodness. You understand? It's a real thing. But it's not some weird thing in the sky I've got to discover. As Lama Yeshe says, emptiness is staring us in the face right here. That cup is already empty of inherent existence. It's not as if you learn about emptiness and then put it on top. It is already empty, but it's complete. We're as blind as bats because we have the misconceptions. So that's why it's so hard to find. So hard to see. And of course, the point of it all is because then we've got liberation. Then we've discovered bliss, people. There's no sense of a separate I. You only got bliss. You got virtue. You got more work to do. But wow, something to be excited about, you know. Because believing in a separate I is the cause of all the suffering, all the dramas, all the fear, all the nonsense, all the lies, all the rubbish. You know, this is the subtlest one. So karma first, then you get to the mind. And then you get to bodhicitta, and now you're ready for emptiness. You know, it's very progressive. Listen, I thought today we don't have a 2-hour lunch break. It's ridiculous. Why don't we just have a half an hour tea break and a cookie break and a snack break, then have another hour or so and then finish? Okay. You people online are happy with that? Good enough.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Good.
There's more sensible use of our time, I think. No?
No.
Then we can all go to the pub later and get drunk if you like. Well, if you like, you could all go for a meal if you wanted afterwards. Go for a meal together and then go home.
Just before
Yeah.
we, generally speaking, we would like to honor you with offerings. And
What?
we want to honor your presence and your teachings for us with offering a kata where people.
Okay, we can do all that.
Well,
We can do all that, and
before
sure, when
we
you like.
leave.
No, of course we can absolutely do that.
Okay.
So why don't we have a bit of a cookie break and a snack break or something now, 20 minutes, and have a talk about emptiness or discussion, and then we come back and have another hour and see how we go. Yeah, what do you think? Is that okay with people? See you in about see you in 20 see you in about 20 minutes. Okay. All right, sweethearts. Thank you. It's still peculiar, so peculiar. Never mind, I don't mind. Doesn't matter. God. So let's continue to talk about emptiness, how things have no inherent nature. The thing is, all of Buddha's, when we really begin to understand all of Buddha's teachings, he's telling us from day one how things exist. You know, everything he presents, everything from starting with the very first one is karma. So he doesn't present it to the Tibetans as if this is what exists, because they already have that view, because it's come from India, it's been in their bones for a long time. But he presents it, he doesn't present it in terms of how it exists, but he presents it in terms of how to use the law. What's that strange noise? Continually coming.
Drilling upstairs.
Something in
The outside there's construction.
Oh, I see. He's telling us how to utilize this law of karma. So in a sense, that's an assumption that there is the law of karma as opposed to creator. But he just tells you how to use that law in order to make sure you don't suffer in the future. That's the framework, you know. But implicitly, it's telling us about things, how things are cause and effect, as I said. And that already is preparing us to begin to loosen the grip of ego grasping. Because when we start to apply karma, it means we start to become accountable and realize that we have to cause ourselves happiness and we have to stop causing ourselves suffering rather than sitting there waiting for someone else to do it to us, which is the typical view of ego. So already we're loosening the grip of ego grasping, although we don't necessarily see that. And then you get to the second scope, and this is, I find, very interesting. The second scope is where you learn about the delusions and learn about the afflictions, as they say. And the afflictions is the main word they use. And that's referring to the obvious characteristic of the unhappiness, the pain and suffering of these delusions, that they cause us pain and suffering, that they're really unhappy. That's the evident one. And that's so what we have to learn, the explicit teaching there is to see how attachment and anger and jealousy and low self-esteem cause you pain. But as we keep practicing that, we get to the deeper level and we start to realize the actual function of these afflictions, which is why they cause us suffering, is because they're misconceptions. That's when you start to learn low rig, and you realize that if you join the dots, you know. They don't really go on much about misconceptions until you get to emptiness, when we look at the root misconception. But that misconception component is right there. And that's the thing. Once we understand that all the misconceptions, all the invalid cognitions are why we suffer. Very simply, when you're not in touch with reality, conventional reality of 1 + 1 is 2, conventional reality of cause and effect, conventional reality of impermanence, conventional reality of, you know, attachment not misrepresenting the cake to you, that's all about how things exist, but it's conventional existence. We're not anywhere near ultimate yet, but it's preparing our minds. So all the way through, Buddha's teachings is about how things exist. This is a major, this is the key point in all of his teachings. This is why we have to learn to identify that which is to be abandoned, which is the neurotic states of mind that are misconceptions, because they lead us up garden paths, and then the actions based on those misconceptions, which are setting us up for future suffering. It's all about abandoning those which are the cause of suffering and practicing the virtues which are the cause of happiness. It's all about what exists and what doesn't, what is valid and what is not. These are huge concepts we've got to understand that underpin the entire Buddhist path, you know. In other words, the extent to which we suffer, Buddha very simply says, is the extent to which we're not in touch with reality, both conventional and ultimate. I mean, you know, I mean, better than nothing to say you have a view of a creator, but still it's not a valid concept, Buddha says, but at least there's some happiness that can come from that, but it'll only last so long, because once, you know, because you're still in samsara, and once that karma runs out of being in this blissful God realms, you'll go back to the lower realms. So, you know, it's long term, but it's still not, you haven't cut all the delusions from the mind. You've still got ego grasping. You don't have the heavy duty negative karma of hell realms and lower, you know, and lower realms. Not that, but it's still not enough, you know. So it's all about what is valid and what is not, what exists and what does not. That's Buddha's key point. But initially, it's hard to see that. It's very hard to see that we suffer because we're not in touch with reality. It sounds very puzzling, you know. We do not think that in our world, not absolute certainty. But we suffer because we're not in touch with reality. We suffer because we believe in the misconception, we have misconceptions. And that's the key about the afflictions. Initially, that's really surprising, that afflictions are misconceptions. They're rooted in being misconceptions. So then we've got to ask ourselves, why is all that emotional component there? That's a really good point. And we just got to think that through, I think. So when we understand, certainly the Vajrayana model, that we have the physical energy of the four elements, and then we have the mind, and because they're inextricably linked. So at the gross level, we have gross, in the Vajrayana model, we've got gross consciousness and gross body. Well, this is this bag of bones. And then the gross consciousness is the sensory consciousness. That depends upon the existence of a working body. Then you've got the subtle consciousness, which is your mental states. So even that includes all your concepts, all your rage, all your anger, all your hurt, all your misconceptions, all your wrong concepts about reality, all the afflictions. All of that is mental consciousness, and in its nature, it is subtle, more subtle than sensory, and that has that's inextricably connected to this subtle physical energy. The 72,000 subtle channels that course through the body, the subtle nervous system, all the wind energies that course through those channels, and those wind energies, and then the third is the red and the white drops from the parents. We don't worry about that now. But the subtle wind energies coursing through those 72,000 subtle channels, and this is the point, are inextricably linked to all the different states of mind, all the mental states. They've all, as His Holiness says, they're inextricably linked. And this, if we understand even this, it really helps us understand how we create karma and how we create lower realms and upper realms and enlightenment. Because everything, the thing your mind, as Rama Zopa says, well, as the teachings say, everything your mind does, it develops the habit. It's very simple. Whatever your mind thinks, it develops the habit to keep thinking it. And then eventually you'll do it with your body and speech. That's the habit, isn't it? But the point is here, whenever, you know, there's your anger, let's say one moment of anger, as Rinpoche says, and that anger is in those subtle channels linked to its own wind energies. That's where your mind exists, in those subtle channels, linked to the wind energies. So that anger, every time you're angry, an angry thought, it develops the habit to keep being angry. It's logical. It develops the habit. But at the same time, what it does is pollute the wind energies. Upsets an imbalance of the wind energies, and that eventually manifests at the gross level as physical sickness. And then eventually, long term, that manifests externally. It impacts upon the external elements, and then you get born in the imbalance of the external elements, all caused by that anger and every other action we do. So every action of virtue purifies the winds, which then eventually manifests as good health, and then in turn manifests as external good environment. So we literally create the hell realms to the spirits, to the animals, the humans, the gods, the anti-gods, and even the subtle states of the Hindus, and eventually enlightenment. We are the creators of all of this with our minds. And because we have wind energies that produces bodies, whether it's the body of the four elements of a hell being, you could argue that their body is predominantly the fire element. The spirits is predominantly air element. You know, this is the logic of it, all explained in the Vajrayana. So everything our mind does produces habits, and then eventually the habit, and because we have gross bodies, whether it's sickness or happiness, sickness or suffering, sickness or ill health, sickness or health, and also the body to carry out the wishes of the mind. the servants of the body. The servants of our mind is the body and speech. This is samsara, you know. We create all of it. So all this is, you know, you learn this when you get the Vajrayana, but it helps us understand karma right back at the beginning. And then when we get to the middle scope and we start talking about the mind, when we realize this is the point now to really understand, because we have this subtle physical energies, and because the mind is coursing through the channels, and because the mind is linked to the winds, it's obvious, isn't it? When you get angry, it's like there's a storm inside you, literally a physical storm, isn't it? It's like you're wild inside. That's because your wind energies are impacted by the anger. The wind energies are impacted by your anger. It stirs up the wind energy, which is like you're going crazy. You understand my point? That's why, and that's why we feel, you see, as soon as I look at the camera, as soon as I look at my computer, I'm pointing away from the people, so I can't help it. Never mind. Hello, people. Hello there. Okay, so all right. Can you see what I'm saying? So if you've practiced attachment for many lifetimes, of course there'll be this wild physical energy. When you see the cake, it's like you're going crazy. Your mind is stirred up and wild. When you've got anger as a habit, your whole body is berserk because the wind energies are berserk. Can you see that? The winds and the mind are inextricably linked. That's the emotional component, because the winds, and that's our trouble in our culture. We don't know we're angry until the body's wild. We don't know we're angry until the words vomit out the mouth. And that's when we go to the therapist, but it's kind of late. I always joke and say it's like you've never heard of mechanics, and you drive your car, and you never pay attention to the oil, to the wheels, until suddenly at 120 kilometers an hour on the road, 100 miles an hour, your wheels are falling off. Oh, my wheels are falling off. What'll I do? Nobody's wheels ever fall off because you have the mechanics and you check you notice the wheels wobbling. We don't notice our emotions until they're wild. That's our problem in our culture. That's why I said as yesterday, we should catch the smallest events and work on them. When the wheels start to wobble, when you get annoyed, upset, don't wait for the wild anger to come. I'll be communicating. But that's why the afflictions are so powerful emotionally, is because the mind is so habitual, and it's stirred up the wind energies, which is the physical energy. You understand my point? The Vajrayana explains it, you know. So that's why if you subdue your mind, you calm your wind energies down. That's how you practice. That's what practice is, you know. So the emotional component, our trouble is in our culture because we are completely obsessed with our bodies. Oh, I've got to feel it in my body. It's ridiculous. It's the grossest level. It's too late. Got to start paying attention to the thoughts, and that's the point. It's a surprise to think that anger is based on being concepts. It's sort of like, in other words, anger is a thought, a concept that exaggerates the ugliness of something. So the more you practice that, the more it strongly is in the mind, the more you believe what you see, and the more it stirs up the wind energies into when you have violent panic attacks, you know, violent anger attacks. That's why. That's why we can't control our emotions. And look at the energy of attachment. Even just a glass of water, when you're thirsty, your mind goes berserk. Forget sexual attachment when you go completely berserk. Not criticizing, just looking at it. That's right, when you understand the yogis are able to use attachment, you've got to understand what it means. They've completely subdued their energy, completely subdued attachment. They're no longer fooled because they've harnessed their mind, you know, and therefore the wind energies. That's why Tantra is so, as Amma Yeshe says, so technical. It's like this is for sophisticated technology about the subtle physical and mental energies that the yogis can totally utilize, you know. It's so advanced. So when we study the middle scope, we learn about the afflictions and the pain caused by attachment and anger. When we start to see more deeply these states of mind, we start to see how they are misconceptions, how they misrepresent the outside world back to us. As Thomas ever says, you know. So when you see the world through the lenses of anger, you just see everything as ugly and horrible, and you don't notice good things. You can't see good things because all you're seeing is ugly. because it paints the whole world with that one brush, or the whole person with that one brush, you know. That's why, at least, as Lama Zopa says, bad enough. It's bad enough that because of delusions, things appear wrongly to us. But the worst mistake is because of habit, we believe it is true. So in other words, you see 2 zeros on that note and you believe it's 500 because you've believed it for so long. So it appears back to you as $500 with absolute certainty. So all the energy and attachment and expectation and possessiveness that comes from believing that and expecting 500's worth, you will only be disappointed when you only get 50's worth. That's why we suffer. That's why attachment is always disappointment, is always dissatisfaction, never ending. And we deepen it every time we keep eating the cake expecting happiness. This is the suffering of attachment. This is the grossest level. But they're misconceptions. Mental consciousness can only have 2 levels of cognition, conceptual and direct perception, which is necessarily the subtlest level that you have to train your mind to get to. So we live at the conceptual level. There's no option. Of course, you've got grosser levels of conception, which are all the afflictions. Grosser level of conceptions, and there's much subtler conception. There's valid concepts, which are virtues, and valid concepts like emptiness and all of that. That's valid concepts. We must develop valid concepts. Incredibly sophisticated level of conceptuality. That's what we have to get to. Then we can get to non-conception. Then we can get to direct perception. Then we can get realizations. It's one step at a time, you know. But there's only an option to be at the conceptual level, the gross level, the emotional level. And now the virtues are also emotional. Because you've practiced love and you've practiced compassion so much that your body is moved. Your body, your wind energies are also involved. So you feel the emotion. Tears come. That's not deluded. That's virtue. That's because of virtue. That's also emotional because the winds are involved there as well. But they're not out of control. They're not deluded. They're not misconceptions. They're not berserk. It's virtuous. And then we're ready to understand emptiness now. We've got our head around misconceptions. We understand what misconceptions means. Now we get to the root misconception. The root misconception. So that's called maripa, ignorance, unawareness, not knowing. But it's a very specific ignorance. General ignorance is if you say to me, Robina, what's 1 plus 1? And I'll say, I don't know. That's regular ignorance. But that's not the ignorance we're talking about here. The ignorance we're talking about here is if you say to me, what's 1 plus 1? And I'll say 7. And I believe it's 7. Do you understand me? That's the ignorance. It's like double trouble ignorance. Not only do I not know the truth, I believe in a lie. That's the ignorance we have now. So if we merely didn't know the truth, which is dependent arising, and someone says, how do things exist? So I don't know. But what we think is how things exist is existent, self-existent. We don't think we think it because it's so subtle. It's so absolute, it's so utter in our mind. It's just it's at the level of absolute concrete assumption. Our minds are riddled with layers of assumptions. The root assumption is an inherent I. The root assumption is attachment to get what I want. The root assumption of, not the root, the other assumption of anger, I don't deserve suffering. Attachment is I do deserve happiness. They're all these assumptions. They're this hubris, this arrogance of all these assumptions, and we can't even hear them. So the root ignorance, not only do we not know how things exist, not only do we not know that things are dependent arisings and that things are empty of inherent existence, not only do we not know that fact, we believe not even just something else, but the exact opposite. We believe the exact diametrically opposite reality. We believe the exact opposite. So the believing in the exact opposite and clinging to it as absolute truth, that's the suffering. That's the torture. That's why it's so hard to change. If we merely didn't know the truth, I think we could be enlightened in like a year because we're so clever, you know. But it's so tremendously hard to change it because we believe the truth, the lies are presenting themselves as the truth to us. Like emptiness is not hiding from us, as Lama Zopa says, and Lama Yeshe says, emptiness of a cup. Oh, I don't have a cup. There's emptiness of cup, ordinary emptiness. Emptiness of that glass, you know, of the emptiness of a glass, the inherent glass. You know, it's right there on the glass. It's staring at us. That reality is evident to anybody who has the mind to see it, but we don't see it. We're blind. We're like colorblind. Pink, you know, blue glass is existing right there, but if you're colorblind, you'll never see blue, you'll just see pink. Of course, you believe it. So emptiness, and even subtler level, grosser levels, impermanence. This glass is impermanent. It's an easy one to see. We can understand it's a stepping stone to emptiness. We know it's impermanent. We know it contains its nature is breakability. But if you're grasping at it and believing it's true and perfect and like a divine antique, and then when it's broken, you're shattered because you assumed it shouldn't break. You know, your relationship. People cling frantically to this relationship. Finally, I found happiness, everyone says. Now I've found my partner. I've found happiness. And so no wonder when they die on you, you're absolutely shattered because you believe they were permanent, because you can't stand the thought that they're not. Remember one person I always quote, when she fell in love with her husband, got married, she said, "We will be together until we're 80. So what's happening here is, you know perfectly well, she knows if you do the analysis of the world that people die and relationships end. But because of attachment being so fierce, then you can't bear, attachment is living in constant fear of losing the object. So we can't bear the thought you'll lose the object. So then we've added another lie on top that it's permanent. This relationship will never change. So we believe because it's nice today, it'll be nice for 80 years. So it's just completely a lie. We can see technically it's a lie. No one can prove that. No one can say that with certainty, but we believe it's true because we want it to be like that. So we're lying all the time to ourselves. And what is lying to us is the delusions. Yeah, Eric.
Is there anything that's permanent?
Permanent, you mean lasting forever? Is that what you mean by permanent?
Yes.
Lasting forever. Yes, yes. Your mind is permanent, lasts forever. And when you've realized emptiness and you've cut the root of delusions, that bliss and the cessation of suffering will last forever. Absolutely. Yes. But it's still impermanent in its nature because it's changing moment by moment. Your mind is changing moment by moment. But your mind is beginningless and endless. Once you realize emptiness, you cannot suffer anymore. You can only get better and better and become a Buddha. That's permanent. That's forever. That'll never end. Once you realize emptiness, you can't go back. You can never be deluded again. So that's permanent, definitely.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Well, suffering is no. I mean, anything else is enough, isn't it? I mean, your mind. Okay, matter and mind are always existing because you know minds are connected to matter and they can never be separated. So if your mind is beginningless and endless, it's always existing. Once you're in, but in suffering can be ended. Suffering is not permanent; it can be ended. That's the whole point of Buddha's teachings. But once you've achieved the bliss of your own mind, having realized emptiness and cutting suffering, that happiness can never change. That bliss can never change. That's the point. Do you understand me? Why is it not enough for you? What are you asking? What are you getting at? I can't quite hear what you're getting at.
What I'm getting at is during the break, we were having a discussion on permanence and impermanence.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that you
Okay, so this is
ask the question. But one of the other, like I mentioned yesterday, like some of the problems that I have trying to
I can't hear you quite well, Eric.
one of the problems, another problem that I have embraced in Buddhism is the concept of impermanence, and yet when you finally reach enlightenment, that's a permanent state. This is in direct
Okay, so no,
contradiction.
no. Okay, we've got to understand this word permanent and impermanent, Eric. That's the problem. They use it in a different way. The meaning of impermanent, the real energy of impermanent means changing from moment to moment. It's not something lasting forever or not lasting forever. That isn't the meaning of impermanent. It's more to do with the dynamics of how something exists. So like chair is an impermanent phenomenon insofar as it's dynamic. It's made of, you know, all these particles, and it comes into being, and eventually it'll go out of being. A person is impermanent insofar as you start as a baby and you end up as an old man and you die. All the regular things of the world we know are like that. Would you agree with that? That type of impermanence. Now, impermanent doesn't mean lasting forever. So your mind, your consciousness is never began and will never end. So in that sense, it will last forever, but its nature, moment by moment, is dynamic insofar as it's changing dynamically moment by moment. So the permanent they're referring to is meaning not changing moment by moment, which is really just relating to abstract things like the absence of something, things you can't taste or touch or smell. That's all. But lasting forever isn't the way they use the word permanent. So your mind will last forever, and then suffering will last forever if you don't change it. But it can be stopped. That's Buddha's key point. Suffering can be ended. But once you've realized emptiness and you access the bliss of your own mind, which is natural, because you no longer have delusions, you can never, ever suffer again. So your mind, as long as it exists, and it exists forever, will always be blissful and joyful and virtuous. They're like our true nature. See what I'm saying? The difference, the use of the words. Is it clearer now?
Clearer. Say
Good.
that one thing again you said about that it changes, but that was not that
impermanence is more to do with the dynamic nature of something that's right there. It's dynamic insofar as it's not static. It's not set in stone. It's dynamic and changing. That chair, if you had a movie of it, and you know it lasts for 500 years, and you sped it up, you'd see this constant disintegration, right? So in the simple sense, all the physical phenomena have this disintegrating kind of character. Do you see what I'm saying? Well, that's pretty clear. So our body is that. It disintegrates. So that's an example of how some phenomena, that's how they are impermanent. Now, your mind also, which is not physical, is also impermanent insofar as you can change it. If you've got an angry thought and think, I can never change, then you'll only ever be angry. But you can stop being angry. So therefore, it's impermanent. If you change something, changing and changing, that's the meaning of impermanence. Now, your mind is lasting forever. So the way we would say it, oh, it's permanent. That's not the way they use that word. It's lasting forever, but it's in its nature, moment by moment, changing. You see my point?
Yeah.
That's all. Thank you. Thank you so much. What else, people? Something else we'll keep going. Okay. So then back to this one of the mind, the ignorance. Ignorance, the root delusion, has the same character as all the other afflictions, insofar as it is a misconception, no matter how subtle, it is a misconception that misrepresents whatever it's cognizing back to your mind. That's how they work. When we understand that, we've got some sense of the way we see the world, you know. So when anger is in your mind, you know it. When you're angry, even maybe you love your husband, but when you're angry with him, it's like he's this monster. He appears ugly. You know, you can see, you can't even bear his name. Go away, you know. We know that. So the thing is, you know, when you're angry with a person, or a person you don't like a politician, we only want to see an ugly person. We only want to see an ugly person. It seems like shocking to think that he might be kind to his dog. Come on, it's not real. He's an evil person. We want to paint the whole of him with the one brush. That's what delusions do. You know? And you know yourself how painful that is when someone hates you. They don't see any good in you. They can't see any good. And you know it's wrong. It's not valid. You know there's good inside you. But when we're angry, we want to hate that person. And then we have, like we were talking before, we have compassion for somebody. We only want to see a saint. That's why we can't stand the thought the little baby, like that 4-year-old child who is being abused by some man. 5 years ago, they were a fat, old, ugly pedophile. We don't want to know that. That means you've got to, because if we find someone's done something wrong, then you deserve suffering, mate. So it's too uncomfortable for us to think that a baby, isn't innocent. They've come from being a pedophile in the past life. That we don't want to know about. It's too uncomfortable for our minds because we want a pure, innocent victim and we want some monster, evil, bad person. Our minds are very emotional, very neurotic, very extreme, That's how we think. Or why any good thing should ever happen to a bad person. No way on the planet, Our anger wants people to suffer. Like I work with people in prison for years, in this country especially. It's based on vindictiveness. It's based on you got to suffer. How dare you make prisons nice, Nah, they don't deserve it. That's the heaviest level of anger. They've got to suffer, That's anger. It's so heavy. You can see the suffering it causes. And then we have compassion for only the innocent victims. So let's look right back to the first noble truth. There are 3 levels of suffering. The first one is the suffering of suffering, which is when the bad things happen. That's the only one we think about. But the second one is referring actually to what we would refer to as happiness. That's really shocking. In other words, the happiness that comes when our attachment gets what it wants is what we think of as happiness, and that's what we crave. What suffering is when attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is the bad things. That's our view of suffering and happiness. Well, Buddha says that happiness, which on a relative level is some happiness, but we can all see it doesn't last. So it's locked into being even a subtler level of suffering because you grasp at it, that cake taste, that happy taste from the cake, you grasp at it as real and permanent and inherent, and you greedily follow it and you stuff yourself with it. So with that attachment, you create even more of the gross suffering in the future, not to mention the cake 3 pieces later will turn into the gross suffering. You'll want to vomit now. This is scientific truth. We don't know any other happiness. We wouldn't even know how to get happiness that doesn't change into suffering. There isn't one. There's no such thing because the only happiness we know is what you get from attachment. And then the third kind of suffering, which we don't even think about, is all pervasive, which, is the subtlest level of suffering insofar as we're born with ignorance, we act out the delusions and you die with it and you keep creating more and there's no choice about it. So it's a bit like, the all-pervasive suffering is a bit like you're born in a body of a junkie with a mind of a junkie and the world you live in is junk. And to survive, you have to ingest it. That's all pervasive suffering. There's no choice about it. Living in a world of objects of the senses, in a body made of the 5 senses, driven by attachment, that's all pervasive suffering. There's no choice. So how do you get rid of the first kind of suffering? Following the first scope and giving up harming others. How do you get rid of the second kind of suffering? Follow the second scope and give up delusions and attachment. How do you get rid of the third kind of suffering? Realize emptiness. It's the entire path all laid out, And it's the third kind of suffering that Buddha says the Hindus didn't get because they hadn't realized emptiness. That's where he diverged in his own path. So to recognize this marikpa, this root ignorance, is not easy. You've got to you've got to prime your mind through the lower scope, the middle scope, the great scope. Then you're ready. Then your mind is ready. Based on bodhicitta and renunciation, you can realize emptiness. Without the prerequisites of bodhicitta and renunciation, it's impossible. Impossible, impossible, impossible. Well, actually, you can realize emptiness without bodhicitta. It's true. That's because by definition, emptiness and the last two perfections, concentration and emptiness, are actually Hindu teachings. Sorry, they're actually Hinayana teachings. But concentration is a Hindu teaching even. And so if you want to realize, if you want to be on the Hinayana path, you do the first two scopes. Then you give up harming others, you live in vows, you go to the second scope, you give up attachment, then you get shamatha, and you realize emptiness, and you're out of here. So to realize emptiness at the Hinayana level means that emptiness is a Hinayana teaching. But it's taught on the Mahayana in the framework of the six perfections. And you've got to get bodhicitta first. Because my sense is if you realize emptiness before you get bodhicitta, the bliss is so inconceivable that you forget all about sentient beings, I promise you. I remember one Lama in Queensland when he was teaching, he said, because what happens is many of the Hinayana teachings say that when you realize emptiness and you've achieved nirvana, your mind has ceased. Your mind, not just delusions, but your mind has ceased. And you disappear into a puff of smoke. That's what they say. That's the real nihilism. That view that you end up, there's nothing. The Mahayanas say, when you've achieved your nirvana without bodhicitta, you zap into bliss and you last in this bliss for a long time. And the Buddha comes along and taps you on the shoulder and says, okay, honey, you better come out of that bliss now and get back on the path and become a Buddha to help sentient beings. And that Lama said, to give up that bliss is the worst suffering in the universe. So to begin to have that bliss and then think of sentient beings, forget it. So wise on the bodhisattva path, the renunciation is just seeing the disgustingness of suffering and wanting to give it up. Then you go to the bodhisattva path and get bodhicitta. And then you have this tremendous power of compassion and love for sentient beings. Now you're ready to realize emptiness without losing the plot, So skillful. So ignorance is the ignorance of not only not knowing reality, but believing in lies. That's why it's so hard to change, because we are addicted to our beliefs. We're addicted to our assumptions. We are completely addicted to what we think is true. We cling frantically. That's why we have panic attacks all the time when they're threatened. So deep are these misconceptions. The fear is so tremendous, grasping onto a sense of reality, that it's unbearable to even consider giving them up. That's why we all go mad. It's so intense. Any questions, people?
Oh, I have
Go, sweetheart. Okay, Shuyang and then Rami. Shuyang, sweetheart.
I'm very new to learning Buddhism.
Okay,
Where do I start to work on my issues? Like, I know, yeah, we're horrible. We want to get there. How?
I know, darling. This is what this path is all about. What do you do right now? What's your practice look like? What do your teachings look like? If you have anything, I don't know. Just asking. Are you part of any center or what?
No.
Okay.
I've joined virtually. I'm based in Iowa, and there's nothing in my area.
I understand, darling. I understand.
So
do you
I
listen to
joined
some
those
teachings? Do you go to courses? Do you do some meditations? What do you do, darling?
I've done meditation one or twice.
Well, I really
I
recommend there's so many of the, certainly in our centers, the FPMT. I mean, there's lots of centers now on Zoom. That's why it's a very advantage that, you can start studying one of these courses. What are some of the courses we do here that would be helpful for Shuyang to start?
Discover Buddhism.
Who teaches that one?
So we teach it, so it cycles.
What, darling?
It takes us like 6 weeks to complete it.
Okay, who teaches it?
Venerable Damcho.
Who's that?
Our nun.
Oh, that nun, the one. And then what do you teach? What's the one you teach, darling? You, Jody.
Twice a month, generally on.
I can't hear you, sweetheart.
It's twice a month. Introduction to Buddhism.
Okay, so for a start, a couple of courses this center has, they'd be good to introduce you to all these things we've been talking about this weekend in a nice, orderly way. But if you want to research on FBMT, there are so many centers that have 3-year courses, 1-year courses, 5-year courses, depending on your mind, what you want. It's really crucial to get involved in a course, one step at a time. So you can go once and just hear it each step of the way, like I've been talking this weekend. And then you start to get, you sort of join the dots and start to see the relationship between the different pieces and develop some kind of practice. I mean, you're a mother with kids, so you're going to be busy, but there's plenty available. So go to look at this center or go to fpmt.org and look at some of the centers. And so many teach this course called Discovering Buddhism. Some are more intense, some are less intense. There's so much available, sweetheart. Do you understand? So if you,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, I mean, I'm only suggesting, if you want to get my email address, you can email me and I can send you some links to different centers. Would you like to do that?
Yes, please.
Well, then my email address is just my name, Robina Corton, at Mac, like the computer, at mac.com. So just email me, remind me of this conversation, we can have a chat, okay? And I'll lead you in the right direction. All right, sweetheart.
Thank you very much.
Go on, Rami.
So my question is about the nature of the. Okay, I'll say it like this.
Yeah, go on.
The cupness of the cup, the
Yeah.
illusion of the ego. It feels
Yeah.
natural. It can even understandable. Like people would agree upon it. Most people would agree upon the cupness of the cup and the existence of the ego.
That's right.
The separate ego.
Yes.
The being a junkie is a different state. We have to become a junkie. It's unnatural to be a junkie. So my question is, why is it that it feels so natural to be addicted to those illusions?
The simplest answer, which is disappointing, but it's just fact, habit. The more you do something, we know that the more you do something, the more easy it becomes to do it, and you just go there like a magnet. The more you think something, the more you just go there. It's just the way. It's just, I think it's how we are. We're just naturally like that.
So it's hard because it's breaking the habit.
Mhm.
It's hard, but yeah, the stronger, it's obvious. The more strongly. I mean, if I'm married to you for 27 years and I only see the good side because you have another life, you have a second wife somewhere with other children, and I never see any evidence of it, and that's very common. It happened to one of my sisters. She never saw any of the reality. So when you discover that reality, it's beyond shocking. For years you've been living in a lie, but you never saw it. You never saw it. So we are like that. We're living in lies, and because our minds are limited, and often we just see what we want to see. When you're really attached to something, you only see the good side. When you're angry with something, you only see the bad. We don't have a more nuanced picture of it. So it's very shocking to us. And our ego is addicted to holding on to these misconceptions. They seem to be to our advantage, And it's just like torment. That's why when we see an alcoholic and we wonder why they can't see that they're falling on the street all the time, why don't they do something about it? It's very hard, because when you've developed a habit so strong, it pushes all the other parts of your mind away. You can't see any options. When you if the same as being, if you're an alcoholic for so long, that so dominates your mind, so dominates your life, it's impossible to think that you might have the choice to change. It's impossible. It's like, and what we do is we define ourselves. We have this very vivid sense of defining ourselves. So if you think you're nobody and you're nothing, you don't know anything, you're ignorant, I'm hopeless, I'm no good, I'm ugly, guess what you're going to present to yourself and everybody else is exactly that picture. Or even if you're depressed all the time, depression is so pervasive, and you say to a person you could change your mind, it seems impossible. It seems impossible because it kind of like it floods the whole of our mind, and it's very hard to see things in a more nuanced, rational way. I think we know that. And it's terrifying to give up these old habits. It's very curious, isn't it? Got to really look inside to see this is how it is, What else, people? Nothing? Yes, go, sweetheart.
Looking at wisdom, compassion, and power,
Yes.
I feel like a living teacher is really powerful. As in, like, just the instance of you giving us feedback. That was such a powerful At least for me, it felt
I understand,
very
sweetheart. I know it's good to have, it's good, we all need that, you know, we need that. We need the communication. We need that. And anything you learn, you need that. You've got a really kind piano teacher who points out what's going on. It really helps. We need that. We can't just sit there in ourselves reading a book, you know. We need the human contact, don't we? I think it's very true. We need that. I remember Lama Yeshe said, he said, the Buddha's dead, basically. You know, the Buddha's dead, okay? So the only time the Four Noble Truths will be real for you is when you hear it from the mouth of your teacher. So that's why they always encourage us to find a person whom we can decide is our teacher, because it makes it's more human, it's more dynamic, isn't it? We need that very much. We're human beings, you know. We need that contact. I agree. I agree completely. So, okay, I think the thing I'm getting at here again, the thing is Buddha's deal. He's saying we're suffering and he's found methods to stop suffering. And if he cut to the chase, his actual main point, which is fully expressed when it comes to emptiness, but which is implied throughout the rest of the path, is that we suffer because of the mind, and we suffer because in the mind there are these misconceptions, and that then have an emotional component out of habit that then blind us. We suffer because we're not in touch with reality. It seems almost so abstract. It's just utterly surprising. No one would ever, if we thought about why we suffer, we would never think it's because we don't see things properly. That's Buddha's deal. That's his incredible skill. That's why the job is from day one is to start doing things that will help our mind start to be in touch with reality. You know, the final stages of really engaging in that approach is really when you get to emptiness, but it's all the stages on the way imply it, you know, getting in touch with reality. It's very surprising, but it's very delicious. So I think we can happily stop now. But unless you have any other questions, I think we should stop there. Unless you have any other questions, any other things you'd like to discuss that you think are useful. You have to let me know. So, okay. I think we just be happy that we've had this communication for a few hours together. It's been certainly helpful for me. I mean, Lama's gave me this job years ago, and all I can say is every time I have to speak all this stuff, I'm very happy. Helps me every time. So thank you for the opportunity. And if there's anything we can remember from this, or we've taken notes from this and that's useful to us, take it as tools, be delighted, and use it as well as we can. And really a major one is to rejoice, be very happy with ourselves, for our effort, you know, our efforts to be better human beings, our efforts to help others, our efforts to be in touch with reality, delight in our progress. We must delight in our progress. We really forget that. And never give up. And have the courage to open our minds to understand karma, why Mr. Trump, why suffering, why Iran, why all the people being thrown out of the country, why bad things happen, why good things happen. And that each one of us, this is this ignorance, they say, this is the ignorance that makes the bodhisattvas have such compassion for us. Forget the ignorance of how things really exist ultimately. It's the ignorance of karma, the ignorance of cause and effect, the ignorance that our mind is our own, that we're not created by somebody else, that we come into the life program with our own habits, and that we are the creators of our happiness and our suffering. The bodhisattvas have such compassion for us for this ignorance, for thinking. We all, look at us, frantically looking out there for who to blame for our suffering and for who to blame for our happiness. I blame Gabriel for making me happy, and I blame him for making me suffer. We think happiness and suffering come from out there. That's the hugest mistake, the major mistake. And if we can cut that mistake and start to take responsibility for our own mind, this is a huge step in the right direction to realize emptiness. Cutting this sense of an innocent victim, not fair, poor me. It's powerful, I tell you. So looking at all of this and being happy with what we've done and never giving up, having the enthusiasm of the bodhisattvas to never give up. They think in terms of eons, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, you know. So if you've got any prayers you can put on the screen, just like the dedication and Lama Zopa's swift return prayer. Have you got those, Gabriel?
Not really.
What, darling? I can't hear you. What?
He's looking.
I have to find them.
Okay, we do that then. You know where they are, or you have to search? Because if you let me share, I can find them immediately.
Yes, you please.
Okay. So let me share. What's this? Let's have a look. Oh, this is ridiculous. Oh, it's prayers. Oh, it's me singing prayers. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Wrong one. Where is it? Dedication prayers. This one, try this one. I thought I had it. No, it's not going to let me open. Tablet prayers and practices. Pilgrimages could do. What's this one? Okay, here we go. Dedication. Dedication prayers. 5 essential dedication. Well, this is slightly different. We'll go for that. We'll do this one. 5 essential. This is nice prayers. When I went on this pilgrimage, we did all these pilgrimages. Rinpoche gave me 5 essential prayers we should do. So let's do those together. 5 essential. Here we go. Okay, just I'll share them with you. And the new people who haven't got a screen just have to listen. Share. Here we go. Okay. Just here we go. 5 essential prayers. So we'll just first one. As a result of the 3 times merits of myself and others, may bodhicitta, from which the happiness of all sentient beings comes, be generated in the minds of myself and other sentient beings without delay, even for 1 second, and that which has been generated, may it increase. As a result of the 3 times merits of myself and others, may emptiness be generated in the minds of myself and other sentient beings without delay, even for 1 second, and that which has been generated, may it increase. So now dedicate an emptiness. Meditate very intensely and precisely as we recite the following prayer. When your mind is in that state, you labeling 3 times merits of myself and others. May I generate Guru Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment, lead all sentient beings. Well, you can see that it is mere imputation, that the 3 times merits, enlightenment, I, are empty of existing from their own side. Everything appears to you as mere imputation. Your dedication is mere imputation. It's not completely non-existent, but it's like non-existent. If that idea comes, it's extremely good. So this is the added point. When we think of emptiness, we think bad things are empty, but good things are empty as well. As a result of the 3 times merits of myself and others, which are empty, of existing from their own side. I'm putting things on here, which are dependent arising, the result of causes, therefore empty of existing from their own side, therefore existing conventionally. May I, who am empty of existing from my own side, I, merely labeled, merely imputed, existing, but not from my own side, achieve Guru Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment, which is empty of existing from its own side. It does exist, it is attainable, but not from its own side. It's a dependent arising based on causes and conditions and hard work. And lead all sentient beings who are empty of existing from their own side to that enlightenment, which is empty of existing from its own side, as quickly as possible, by myself, alone. See, that's the courage of the Bodhisattva, you know. So now, Whatever dedication the victorious ones gone to bliss of the 3 times have admired as best, I shall also perfectly dedicate in the same way all these roots of virtue, so that I may perform good works. And now finally, you should recite the prayer for meeting Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. Because of the past, present, and future merit created by me and by Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and sentient beings, may I, my family, students, and all sentient beings be able to actualize completely in this very lifetime Lama Tsongkhapa's path of unified sutra and tantra, which is pure like refined gold. May this pure teaching of Lama Tsongkhapa spread in all directions, and flourish forever. And now let's do the little prayer that His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote for us to recite for the quick return of our Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who passed away 3 years ago. So here it is. Just think. So, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Lozang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer, this wish, okay? And now these next verses are to Lama Zopa himself. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience, that's his name, Zopa, patience, that is never discouraged. So patience is looking the bad things in the eye and welcoming them. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you we make this request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. This was such a great loss for us. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the oceans of the 3 jewels and of the waves of the great waves of bodhicitta, of the children of the victorious ones, the bodhisattvas, may your smile of this new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. So His Holiness said a couple of years ago, because he's tracking where the reincarnation is, that he's been reborn in Nepal. He's probably about a couple of years old, I suppose. So I always think of him out there with all his little woolly hat on, because it's still cold, I suppose, up in the mountains, playing with his brothers and sisters, hopefully. So we want him to hear us and want him to come soon to Kopan Monastery in Kathmandu Valley, so he can start studying again, and then so he can start teaching us again. So may we live long enough to enjoy his teachings when he comes. So may he come back quickly. That's it, everybody. Done for the day. Cooked.